We are back again for the vBrownBag build day at Pure Storage. After a little false start caused by some audio gremlins, we're going to head straight into the festivities again. So I'm Alistair Cook, and this is the vBrownBag build day at Pure Storage here in Mountain View at Pure Storage's head office. And I'm going to play the customer today, and joining me to be the systems engineer is a real live systems engineer, Stacey Brown.
Stacey Brown. I've been at Pure about three and a half years. So I've done quite a few of these, and after all those audio adventures, we're really going to look simple now. So it's going to be fun.
And it's always good when the challenges we have aren't actually related to the equipment. Actually, it's better not to have these challenges at all. So our general agenda for today is first to have a little tour of the new vBrownBag mobile lab that I've built that is the customer environment. So we have an existing vSphere customer environment, which is our standard way of coming into this because most people already have an environment. And we're going to then commission a brand new Pure Storage array. It's currently powered off and is close to as shipped from factory. I think the one thing we've done is install the data pack into it, which is the first set of 10 solid state drives. But apart from that, it's the way it is, comes from a factory, and we'll go through the entire initial configuration and setup.
That's right.
We'll attach it to the customer's vSphere environment and make some storage available. Kind of important. It's really important to this customer because the lab that I've brought is suffering from a real problem with an underperforming NAS. And it's causing me some real pain that my NAS is too slow, and that's why I've come to Pure Storage to give me some much better, higher performance storage. So once we've attached the Pure Storage array into the existing environment, then we'll migrate some virtual machines across and see the improvement that we get from those virtual machines when they migrate across.
Yep.
But of course, that is, as you'll see, is literally too easy to make for an interesting show. So we're also going to look at some of the more day two operations, the things that you continue to do for a long period of the life of the array. And this is one of the places where Pure is differentiating themselves in that there is absolutely the engineering target is that there will be no downtime for any upgrade or lifecycle activity on the array.
That's correct.
And so we're going to do some of those lifecycle and upgrade processes as well. We'll upgrade the array. Then we'll punch out a few more virtual machines. After all, we'll have a lot more capacity and a lot more performance, so I can finally unleash the application that I brought and scaled up and run more workload and maybe start to get something that causes a blip on the performance charts on the array, because it's kind of a little bit of a challenge.
Let's see if we can push this thing.
And then Stacey, as my implementation engineer, will be happy when I've got workloads on and I can self-manage running those workloads.
Yep.
And then we'll switch in Cody Hosterman. And he is going to come and help me with automating processes and looking at vRealize orchestration. vRealize Orchestrator as a way of putting more automation and more business process around deploying, and particularly handing over to the business units that own the applications the ability to deploy on top of this environment. So that's our general plan for the day, or for what we have left of the day, which should be ample time.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is. It is going to be good. And do interact with us on Twitter and on the YouTube stream page. Let us know if you've got questions, if there's things you want to see, because the great joy of having a real engineer with us is that we can ask questions and look at things that we haven't necessarily immediately thought of.
Yep, this is all for you guys. So anything that comes up along the way that you want to know more about, that's what we're here for.
And Jeffrey, have you added my capturing my screen in so I can do the tour?
Working on now.
So as part of the resolving the audio issues, Jeffrey's had to completely rebuild our live streaming configuration, and that meant starting from scratch the work that he's done over the last 3 days to get it all nice and clean. So
we had some technical difficulties, so we're going to go on the agenda. Array commissioning, followed by VM migration, array upgrade, the VM deployment, and then vRealize Orchestrator integration. Most with Stacey, and then bringing Corey as we go. Now, Alistair is getting ready to log in to start to show you that, so we'll pick up from there.
And you can see a not hugely responsive vSphere web client. That's partly because it's sitting on my overloaded, underperforming NAS. I'm sorry if there was an echo going on because I had the stream page up. So we have an environment that was built using the usual Autolab configuration. Many of you will be familiar with that automation process. Probably you haven't seen it used to deploy physical ESX servers, since it normally deploys nested ESX servers. So a lot of the naming and numbering is the same. And I did use Autolab to deploy this. I just connected it to a physical network rather than having it in an isolated network. So I have my 2 ESX servers. The 2 ESX servers are one of the nicest compact lab environments that I've seen, which is the Supermicro E200 8D. So it's a Xeon D system that can take up to 128 gigs of RAM, and it's got multiple 10 gig Ethernet adapters, and that's really important when we're connecting to an IP storage environment. So I've got 2 of these, both with 128 gigs of RAM. And then there is just the local SSD. I've got the Supermicro Disk-On module, the DOMS, as the boot device, but there's no other local storage inside the servers. All of the storage is then remote out on a NAS device. It's a physical NAS device I wrote about in the past, which is a QNAP NAS book. It's definitely not designed for running virtual machines. It's designed to just be a little NAS that you have in meeting rooms or use at home as a media center box. So it definitely struggles when I try and run 20 or 30 Windows machines or try and run a significant workload on it. And that's accessible to me both as NFS data stores and as iSCSI data stores. So you can see the collection of disks that I have in here. Very familiar names from Autolab of the iSCSI 1 through 3 and NFS 1 and 2, as well as the build share. And then I've got a bunch of virtual machines. So I built a few Windows virtual machines, a few Linux machines. The Windows 7 machine that I'm using to manage this is sitting on here. It's that Win 7 machine at the bottom. So it's a pretty conventional vSphere environment built on Autolab, and then the cluster has a couple of dozen virtual machines on it. So what do we got? 146 vMotions have occurred on this DRS cluster since I created it. That's unsurprising because I had to use maintenance mode and move those 30-odd virtual machines around. So it's a fairly conventional, very basic vSphere environment. It hasn't had a lot of tuning applied to it. It's very much as it comes out of the box install.
Perfect.
So that's what we've got for vSphere. And then we should probably have a look at the array and start doing the configuration of the array.
Yeah, should we just go ahead and go straight over here to the array? Let's go ahead and pop off the nice bezel. You notice that ordinarily when this array ships, we've already put in some of the first data pack. There's 10 modules in each data pack. So we've populated half of it. If this were what you purchased, there would actually be some
blanking
cartridges,
plates in there.
some blanks on the other side.
Of course, this is a array that's been out and doing demo for a while, and it didn't arrive with us the same as it would have come from the factory.
Correct.
But of course, we've had it reset back. And
Exactly.
we're currently powered off, so we can pop out these modules, and you can see that they're just a fairly conventional disk tray.
Yep.
But instead of spinning Rust in it, it's got an SSD.
Actually, it's got two of them in
hasn't
there.
it? I was just looking at the label. Says 1 terabyte on the disk, and it says 2 terabyte on the pack.
Yeah. So for each, this is what we consider a single flash module. And when we talk a little bit more about failure and how many failures we can sustain, we are talking about the module as a whole, even though there are 2 physical flash devices within this single module. So in this particular case, if you look at this, it says it has a 1 terabyte flash module in here. And yet on the front, when you look at the front, you can see that it's noted as a 2 terabyte flash drive. That's because we have 2 of them in here. So if we did the sizing for this particular array with 10 slots populated, this then is a 20 terabyte data pack. So we have a 20 terabyte data pack here. Pretty straightforward. I don't know if we want to talk at all about the back.
Let's get the install started, because as usual with installing enterprise gear, there's some times when you wait. So let's get it powered on and start doing the initial configuration.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say is there tends to be times when customers are plugging these flash modules in. And one thing to be mindful of is just making sure that it's pushed all the way in and it seats correctly. We have had where some aren't seating correctly. Your SE or your implementation engineer should be able to help you with that. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this started here.
And that's the voice of experience out in the data center speaking rather than somebody who's only spent time in the lab. It's really easy to push in the wrong place, and just like any hot plug drive going in.
Oh, first we have to power it on. The simple things. We need
Simple
power.
things. Is the power plug plugged in?
We need to find the power cables.
And you will have heard the screaming banshee in the back. It's neither Pure Storage nor MyLab. It's the Arista switch on the top that is the howling fans that have been our accompaniment for the last 4 days.
Alistair, this is going to take a little while to boot. On initial boot, the operating system, of course, has to post and those kinds of things. We're looking typically around 4 or 5 minutes before the controllers actually come up and online. We've plugged in the power. There's no harm in plugging in the management cables, so we're going to do that as well.
Plug in. So there are separate network interfaces on the back of the two controllers there, and you'll see in the unboxing video that there are two controllers in the back, and they have the same network connections on both. And in this case, because we're doing an iSCSI setup, there are some 10 gig QSFP based connections for the iSCSI network, and separately there are some RJ45 connectors for the management network. So Stacey's just plugging in all of those connections so that they're live through the iSCSI network, comes through to our switch here, through the direct copper cables, and then the management network goes through to a 1 gig switch inside the lab here.
Yeah, and one of the things that we didn't talk about before we get started is, generally speaking, your SE will send you a spreadsheet or a document for you to pre-populate in preparation for the hardware arriving. You're gonna need to configure things like 3 IP addresses, 2 physicals, 1 virtual that will flip between the two. From a management perspective, of course, your iSCSI cables or your fiber channel drops should all be set up in advance. The other thing that we'll ask you to do is open up firewall ports. That's so that the array can send information home. The array is constantly sending home telemetrics every 30 seconds. That's sending that out to our support system so that we can proactively monitor the array and make sure that it's the healthiest it can be. We'll talk a little bit about some of the fingerprinting we do in trying to be proactive in troubleshooting bugs that are identified. Nobody's perfect, right? Everybody has blips along the way. The one thing we want to do is, if we have a customer who's run into a bug, we want to have everybody benefit from that customer's experience and fix the bugs in any exposure any other customer might have in advance of them actually hitting a bug and having any kind of impact to their environment. So it's really important that we open up those firewalls so the array can send information home and we can proactively monitor the health of the array.
And there's some really good benefits around knowing what your customers are actually doing with the arrays that can then drive engineering effort to then better benefit other customers using the arrays. Rather than product management guessing what people are doing with their arrays, that information coming back is extremely useful for product development.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I'm really excited about, and we can talk about a little bit, we have some time here, so I'm just going to mention it. You know, as these arrays are dialing home, one of the benefits that all customers get is all of the performance information is also collected. Everybody's talking now about machine learning and artificial intelligence. One of the advantages that we now have, because we've been collecting all that data over the lifetime of our arrays, is we can now take the other customers' environments, their workload profiles, or an existing customer's workload profile, and start to do some predictive analysis about trending. Things like, what is the capacity consumption trending to be? When will I run out of capacity? Could I potentially run out of performance? What if I'm planning on doubling my workload over the lifetime of that array? Or, there's acquisitions that the company has that they're planning to make that is going to double or triple those workloads. We have the ability to simulate and take those workload performance and capacity and simulate what those will look like if the workload were to double or triple, and what that would actually do to the array that it's currently running on, and start to plan for, would it be able to run on the, a different controller set, the next generation controllers, things like that. So
at what point do I need to start thinking about upgrading the controllers
Yeah.
and those kinds of things?
yeah,
That kind of
not having
predictive
to.
analytics is really cool. So yeah. Incidentally, the console cable does need to be plugged in before anything shows on the screen, which is why we didn't see any of the boot progress.
Okay, so we're logged in as root at this point in time, and usually at this point in time, when you're
I'll get you to
implementation
work a little this
engineer,
way so that we can see the screen as you're typing.
when you're implementation engineer, your SE, or maybe someday in the future yourselves as customers, you should have your IP addresses handy as we run through this. Let's see. So in this particular case, when we powered it on, Purity did start up. So what we're going to do here is we're going to stop the Purity operating system because we want to configure this as a brand new array.
So we didn't quite get our cleansing right on this particular node.
Well, remember that the Purity, the servers themselves run on a Ubuntu operating system. So in the Ubuntu operating system, when it starts up, it just tells the daemons to go ahead and start. So it started even though it doesn't know anything about what its array is. So, and I can't type.
As I said before, if you can type while people are watching, then you're a better person than I am.
So we now have seen that it's no longer running.
Do I need to switch us to the other controller because we're on controller 1?
Yes, let's move over to the other one.
I'm going to go behind now, Jeffrey.
So again, we're logging in as the root password.
Is it usual that controller 0 is the bottom one at the back rather than the top one?
So actually, when you look at the back of the array, when you're going to plug in, the bottom one, CT0, is always, the bottom controller is always CT0. And if you look at the side of the back of the chassis, it's denoted on there as CT0 versus
Right.
CT1.
So that was my fault because I plugged this into CT1.
Okay, that's okay. It's
a learning experience for me too.
So again, you notice that when it came up, when the operating system came up, it started those processes. We're going to shut down those processes. Everything is now shut down. Now we're going to run pure setup, new array. That's the only command that we need to run at this point in time. Of course, it tells us all about our license agreement. I think that this is a pretty fun thing to mention is people are saying, hey, Forever Flash, you guys actually give us free controllers every 3. Does that mean that'll ever go away? If you actually spent the time and you weren't excited about installing your array, you would find that we have it in our license agreement that if you've contractually paid for Evergreen, we are obligated legally to give you new controllers every 3 years.
There's a constraint on pure storage in the license agreement, not just on the
Yes,
client.
it says in there that we're
Nice.
held accountable to that. So, Stacy Brown, I'm an SC.
Excellent. Continue with the setup.
At this point in time, because this particular array has been around through many different events and things of that nature, it's actually just warning us that if we continue on this process, that any data on these particular drives is going to be completely erased, and there's no hope of ever going back.
But it hasn't recognized that there's any valid purity image, pure storage image on there, or we'd have to say, offer
Correct.
our firstborn before we're allowed to delete it.
Correct. That is correct. So rapid data locking is a USB device in the back of the array that can be added. If you need super security, let's just say somebody broke into your data center, you pull that USB, it automatically locks the array so nobody can get into it.
And this is using the built-in encryption that's in the arrays and just storing the keys on a removable device is my
That
guess.
is correct. That is correct.
And that will be really important for 3-letter agencies and military in particular. I
Yes.
know that there have been vSphere environments with encrypted storage arrays that drive around in Humvees.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where you want to be able to pull the keys out and then pull the pin on the thermite as
Yeah.
you walk away.
If it's either in a Humvee or on a plane or
Any of those military scenarios or
Yeah.
any of the deployment. But for most enterprise customers, they're going to not be trying to destroy their data as they walk away.
It's more of a protection mechanism, correct? Now we're going to go ahead and name the array. We're going to call it
Brown bag? Yes, that's us.
And Alistair,
Now
what
I have
is
the
our
spreadsheet
password?
up, but I can remember my IP addressing scheme.
Okay, let's
So
do
we
it.
are 192.168, 199, and this is the physical for controller 1, so this is going to be 221.
221. All right. Now the virtual.
The virtual is the same, but it's 223. Subnet mask is a /24. Gateway is on .2. And again, those of you who use Autolab will be very familiar with some of these IP addresses.
What was it again?
.2 for the gateway,
2.
and .4 for the DNS server. We use
We're
the
going to
default,
leave our default.
Yeah, and no mail relay, and sender domain was vbrownbag.com. That's us.
Actually, technically, I should have you typing this, by the way.
I think we did. I actually typed this when we did one of the run-throughs.
You can do the secondary. How's that?
But you can see that there are, 8 fields that we had to fill in to do the configuration.
Yeah. This is our last chance to say, hey, give it a look. Does all of it look okay? If it doesn't, we have an opportunity to go back in and modify it. If it does, we just go ahead and say, yes, let's go ahead and apply these settings. At this point in time, it is going to say, all right, I'm going to continue to move on. So what is it saying?
It says CT0
Specified network interface does not CT0 and ETH.
We plugged into the right ports in the back.
Yeah, they're plugged in. Are they plugged
Live
into
TV,
this?
folks.
Let's give it a try. Let's walk through it again. See if it picks it up.
So it's saying controller 0 first Ethernet adapter network interface does not exist.
Okay, so let's do this. This is okay. Let's go ahead and
Break out of the setup routine. Yeah.
we're going to break out of it. I'm going to go ahead and reseat the controller in
Okay.
case it's not seated correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this guy down. And as soon as he's shut down, I'll reseat him, and we'll try from there.
Pull them out of the back and plug them back in again. And the ETH0 is a 4-port 10 gig network adapter in the back.
10 gig.
Um,
But it's just for management.
But-
So
let's actually pull the whole thing out and put it on the disk and make sure it's seated internally as well, because it's unlikely to be the connection into the chassis that's causing it to not see ETH0. But
Yep.
we did have to pull those trays out yesterday. Did we pull the trays out of these? We did.
we did.
And
Yeah,
it may be that it's not properly seated back in again.
Yep, you're right.
As we
All right.
go through the festivities today, we will be recommending that you follow up a little survey and a series of questions about the Pure platform. And Pure are going to give away some of these lovely wireless Bluetooth headsets. So they're a fully wireless stereo headset, which is the latest innovation in Bluetooth headsets. So have a look on the YouTube page. There's a link at the bottom to the Pure survey. And we're going to have some drawing of that in a few weeks' time for some lucky recipients. And unfortunately, those of us who live in the rest of the world will be unsurprised to find that legal wouldn't let us ship these outside of the US, wouldn't let Pure ship these outside of the US. So it is US residents only for the draw. But you can absolutely take part in the survey. Now we wait as the hardware posts. And as you'd expect, a modern storage array is really just a couple of x86 servers running some software, usually on top of a Linux kernel. And so we have to wait for those servers to start. And part of the point of getting great performance in here is having a reasonable amount of RAM. And RAM takes a while to check during the post. We've all seen that in servers before. Yeah, and we'll have a look some more at that, and particularly discuss the options around adding more of those modules in the front for performance and capacity reasons. So this time, before we leap in and run the array setup, we'll make sure that all of the network controllers are present. Oh, so controller has come up as controller 1.
What is this controller?
Did we switch?
Oh, we were checking it.
So controller 1 is correctly there.
This is actually CT0.
So this is the bottom one. Because we pulled a controller, it switched.
All up. We had these configured. We pulled them out to pull out some additional cards that were actually in the array. So this particular controller is coming up as CT0 when in fact it is in the CT1 when in fact it is in the CT0 slot. But when we run the peer setup new array, all of that will get resolved. So, ta-da!
Ta-da, now we have CT0. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, so I think the main point of taking it away is some of the things that we're seeing here on a brand new unboxed array you wouldn't see.
This has been the result of manhandling over the last 3 days. So now we'll do the new array. Accept the license agreement, take all of the commitments. And then through that same wizard. Setting up. And I'm going to take over the keyboard.
Huh?
I'm going to take over the keyboard from you when we get up
Yes,
to
you
entering the
should.
IPs and
You go ahead.
those.
You know the IPs anyway.
Yes, much easier for me to mistype them than
Huh?
but the wizard that we ran earlier may actually have persisted a
Cached
config
them.
file out for us, so I may just be hitting enter repeatedly. We'll see. Array name hasn't come up, so it has not held the config from before. 199.221, 192.168.199.223. Subnet mask is a /24. You know what? You were better at typing this than I was.
Yeah, but it's a lot more fun to have the customers do the install than I get to do them all the time.
This is only my second time, and I imagine your second time was still interesting installing an array, but after a little while it does lose a lot of the interest. No proxy. Confirm that I've got the same subnet all the way down. The addresses
Looks
are right,
accurate.
and away we go. You know what? What we've got is the other controller is sitting on 221.
Here, let's just do this.
Just pull the management.
Well, I wonder if it thinks that it's we do have ETH0 already
Tell you what,
configured.
let's just switch the addresses and we'll retain this one on 222. And when we set up controller 1, it's going to be on 221.
Yeah, just again, you guys, this wouldn't be something that you'd run into as part of a new install. It's a little bit more interesting that we're
we haven't
reusing other homework.
pushed it quite all the way back to factory reset. Is essentially what's going on.
So now it's starting up all those. It's testing its phone home capabilities. So at this point in time, if you hadn't enabled your firewall rules, updated those so that we could send, and those are ports 22 and 443. This would fail, but it would still continue the installation, and then we could fix it after the fact. So it will allow you to still set up the array, configure the array, continue on your way while you call your network team and say, I need help or I missed a step, and have those fun conversations.
And of course, it's nice that we did do validation that the IP address that we entered was already in use, rather than just stamping all over something because we have a poor IP address management.
Yeah, that is true.
We'll stick with America's Los Angeles as our time zone, so we don't have to reboot for that.
Oh, I think it said
I
you
said-
change it.
Confirm to change. No. Okay, I'm going to go with against my. There we go.
Array is ready to use. So why don't you go ahead and type, if you type pure ADM status.
Pure ADM status, since
Yep.
I'm a New Zealander.
Yes.
And now instead of the reds of not started or not
Yep.
running, and
And
nice
now
and
at this point in time, before we even start up the secondary, we can actually connect to the web interface. So if we go into our web browser to the IP address that
Well, let's do
Alistair
that.
put in, We should be able to see that interface. And while you do that, we'll go ahead and power up the other one. You go ahead and show the audience
all right.
what that looks like.
So
Now, John, I just have to
here we are with web browser connected to the network, 192.168.199.223. So I'm entering the cluster IP address because that's going to move between the two nodes as things fail, and it's going to be much more consistent than hitting one of the physical nodes. And Chrome is being Chrome and decides, no, I know better than you. You don't actually want that because you made a typo in it. 168.199.223. Let's try again. There it is. It's not secure because you were using a self-signed certificate on these controllers. Lovely little tip that I got from Stacy is when it comes up and says what's your username and password, Control Q just fills in the defaults and logs in for you. So that saves me a little bit of effort. We have then the pure interface, and you can see in the top left-hand corner some reds and some greens, and of course the reds is the healthy things. No, the greens is the healthy things, and the reds is not so much. And that's showing us the status that controller 0 is up, but controller 1 is not yet connected to it. So now we're waiting for the second controller to go through its post and boot, and then we'll just add the additional node.
Yeah, we mean the hosting. Can you say it again?
Every time you go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're probably going to have to change the name of the controller to match that this is now. Nope, we're good. We're CT1.
Oh, right. Awesome.
Get over that bridge.
So the two nodes have a back channel communication. When one of them said, I am authoritatively controller 0, the other node said, well, that makes me controller 1.
And again, because it was booting up and in the Ubuntu kernel, it starts the daemons automatically. It tried to start. It, of course, cannot start. So we want to make sure that all the processes for the array are actually shut down, which, again, when you get a new array, it will not come up in this fashion. It'll be completely pristine. So when you actually, oh, did I push stop? So when you log into your array, freshly unboxed from the factory, you won't see a lot of these types of things. But again, we're using equipment that's been around for a while. So.
This particular equipment was used, I believe, at VMware for some of their VDI testing, and so it's had some fun.
Hand it over to Alice there.
Oh, you're doing the fun stuff for me now, John. This is where the customer steps in and says, I've got to do the showboaty, but you've done the hard work.
I do, it'd be interesting to hear from the audience as I've gone about and done these installations across multiple customers. I don't know of too many other vendors that allow you to install the array yourself. I'm sure there are some out there, but a lot of customers think this is a lot of fun to get to be part of the process from the very beginning and just see the simplicity, the beginning of the simplicity of how this all goes. So,
and that's really one of the points about what we do is to show that modern IT systems can be extremely simple without sacrificing the power and the capabilities that you want from your infrastructure.
Yeah, I would just to have fun. And because we're on camera, I would say I kind of disagree with that. I don't think that they can be simple. I think that moving forward, they're going to have to become simple because there's going to be so much data to manage that if we don't simplify these things, nobody in your particular situation will be successful. We have to simplify, automate, and hand this stuff over to the business and show them that we're a true business partner to them. And you can't do that when there's a lot of complexity.
All right, so this time I've only had to set up the local IP address, subnet mask, and the gateway. I haven't had to do the DNS or the logical address, the cluster address. So yes, that looks good. And this controller also wants to go out and test that it can talk to remote support and phone home.
Exactly.
Now that phone home doesn't allow support team to connect in at random, does it? There's some real controls around that.
So that's an excellent point to point out to you guys. Just because we've opened up a port where we're sending information back to peer we're not sending actually any of your data. We're just sending information and analytics about the health of the array. We can't come in. I like this analogy. I think it's fun. It's like we're like vampires. We can't get in unless you open the door first. So once the door is open,
So you're telling me that your support team work in darkened rooms and are never exposed to sunlight, and
they're a special
feast
group. Special group of people there. So again, we run into the time zone.
Change time zone.
We do not need to change it.
I will not change the time zone.
Oh, it likes us.
Oh,
So
it's
go ahead and run that pure ADM status.
Pure ADM status.
Mm-hmm.
Again, all working.
So at this point in time, if we go back to the interface, the web browser, we should be all green.
We should put this lovely bezel back on as well, because I don't think people have seen it with the lights on.
Yeah. Actually, this is really fun. In a really dark data center, this shows up really well. So it's a lot of fun.
And it's the old school orange as well. None of this going for modern blue. It's all orange all the time with Pure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's take a look back at that web interface. So I'm still seeing an amber status in here.
Probably refresh your...
And it's showing us an amber on, what is that unit? Yeah, system health is still showing me an amber. And that's not what we were expecting. We were expecting nice and clean and healthy at this point.
And you already refreshed it.
Services are running, and change the view as a refresh. We'll refresh again. So it's showing an amber on the lower controller and on the bar next to the power supply. So this green here is the power supply. So we have two power supplies in the chassis. And then we have the two controllers. So we have a degraded status. The chassis management bus errors is what I've got on controller 1. So the error that we're seeing here is that message passing between the two nodes is showing an amber status. So when you're on the console of one of the two nodes, you can use just a single command line SSH peer will establish a connection to the other of the two controllers. So you don't need to switch the console cable backwards and forwards when the two nodes are up. You
and we say peer. It is. We don't want it to be SSH peer as in P-U-R-E. It's actually SSH P-E-E-R as in your peer.
And so John has restarted the Purity OS on controller 1.
That amber light is still on the controller.
And that's why we saw it go red, and now we've got it. It's gone red now to amber.
So there is, just so everybody knows, there is an amber light on the controller itself in the back.
So we have a physical status. In fact, there's an amber on the front of the controller as well that I can see. So there is physical status to let us know that that there is something less than happy in the environment.
Where did you see the?
This one here. And then we've got a CT1.
Oh.
So we have two lights on the front that are telling us that there is a not quite healthy state. As usual, green on the front of the controller means everything's good, and amber is not quite so friendly. So this may be that the lower controller isn't quite perfectly seated, even though we've been able to do communication over that bus. So if John hasn't seen this error before, I'm getting your name right, aren't I, John? Getting your name right, John?
John.
Excellent. I was just doubting myself for a moment. So if John hasn't seen this error, it doesn't happen very often. He's seen a lot of things as they go through.
And the funny thing is that we do all these dry runs and stuff like that, but it still comes back. You could do it 1,000 times, and then there's one time where it changes.
And we have been through what 5 or 6 builds of this system over the 4 days that we've been here.
Exactly.
And every one of them, we've not had this particular error. So we have empty drive bays. We haven't had any storage in those bays at all this week. The only thing that I'm thinking of is that the other controllers that we have had in here expected to have those bays populated. So now John's doing a process where you replace a failed controller with a new controller.
We'll try and get as much of the screen for you as possible. It might look a little hazy simply because of the fact that we're doing video from the camera.
A little bit and say, I'm actually downgrading controller.
Right. So one of the things we will show you over our time today is the upgrade from the M50 controller to the M70 controller. And the last time we had a working pure array in this chassis, it was with the M70 controller, which you'll see requires additional NVRAM modules, which are located in the front of the chassis. And of course, the M50 doesn't use those NVRAM modules, and that's why we seem to have the system thinks they're absent when they should be present. With an M50, they wouldn't be present. So now we're going to tell the environment that we're downgrading from a M50 configuration, from an M70 configuration down to an M50 configuration. And because we've done that in the web interface, I can now see that the additional NVRAM bays are empty rather than missing. And the additional SSDs that have previously been seen are also not present. Now still the bus is not yet back up, but I think that's simply a matter of waiting for the services to all be settled. Bus is green on the upper controller, but still amber on the lower.
Mike Curtis is saying it's surprisingly very interesting because a downgrade wipe is not something we're ever used to when running, when they started running their beta code.
Yeah, you absolutely expect a ratchet for the upgrades, that you can increase levels, but that there is no expectation that you would ever go down to a lower performance configuration. And yet here we are going through exactly that process in this platform.
So thanks to everybody that's in the chat that's giving your 2 cents worth, I guess. Brian and Jose and Mike so far. We've got about 30 people watching live.
That's
so
nice. Thanks for sticking with us, and particularly through the technical issues we had at the beginning. And of course, we're having even more fun technical issues now.
So we're restarting.
And we can see in the web interface, the lower controller is showing red state as we restart.
Happy to see that doesn't think that we're missing
Yes.
flash devices, and doesn't see that we're missing the second data pack, because those shouldn't even be there at this point in time.
The system should be aware that we don't have that. We're still, after the restart, still showing an amber on that message bus.
I would like to reboot it, like actually.
So now we're going with the engineering reset. Have you tried turning it off and back on again?
Shut down period.
Reboot the controller.
Power it off.
The lower controller.
Higher controller.
Pull it out and set it back in again. Okay, so shutting down the pure operating system on the lower controller, powering it off explicitly. So we get a clean shutdown of Linux as well as the Purity OS. And then pull it out and put it back in with force.
So one of the other things, Alice, there that we can do is while we're troubleshooting a secondary controller, that certainly doesn't need to prevent us from, obviously in a production type environment, we wouldn't do this or wouldn't even make this recommendation. But considering that this is a test lab, with one of the controllers up and online, there's certainly no harm in
so we can
doing the plugin.
Actually connect it to our vSphere environment.
Yeah.
And maybe we start putting some machines on there. How much faith do we have that we're going to be able to protect that data at this point? Are you ready to go that far? Let's see if John beats us. If John can resolve the issue before we got storage presented to my ESX service. How's that?
Let's race. Yeah,
right.
Let's do it. I'm not concerned considering I have full confidence in the array. Set the timer. Jeffrey, set the timer.
Start the clock. All right, what do we got to do now?
So let's go ahead and if we go into, we're on the system tab already. If we click on the plugins portion there, we want to install the vCenter plugin. Because from there was somebody on the thread that actually asked the question if we would show or preview that we can do all of, once the plugin is installed, everything can be done within vCenter server. And so we certainly really want to preview that.
Okay, Jeffrey, you want to switch in my screen?
All right.
So this is the system tab, hit the plugins. System health is still showing red, so we're still ahead of John. vc@lab.local, and my password in here is raytor@lab.local. And connect.
So it goes out and it verifies that it can communicate with that server. And we haven't installed it at this point in time. But now we actually had already pushed the binaries out to our vCenter server as part of our testing that we did a few days ago. So it sees there that, hey, I already have a plugin that's already on the vCenter server, but it's out of date. So let's go ahead and update to the 2.0.
Push the 2.5.
2.5 version. Yep. So it's going to push that updated plugin out there, and then from there we'll go ahead and install that updated plugin.
So this is reaching out to my vCenter server and installing the plugin for the vSphere web client. And there we go, it's installed. Available in an installed version of both 2.5.
So yeah, but we should be good to go. So go ahead and then go to the vSphere.
And being the vSphere web client, I have to log out and log back in again for it to enumerate the plugins. Otherwise, it'll probably barf trying to use the 2.1 plugin when the 2.5 plugin's already installed.
Yep.
Local. And of course, still on the old slow storage, and so log into the vSphere client's going to take some time. John has the second node running. Has everything gone green?
Pressure's on, Alistair.
It is. It's not up yet, but it's a race between the vSphere web client login and the Purity operating system starting on the node. And Shockwave isn't responding.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Gotta love Flash. We'll try again with the web client loading, because we were really looking forward to the day that VMware fully retire this Flash-based web client and gives us the full native HTML5 one.
Oh, John beat you.
It's all green in the Pure interface.
So if I had to speculate, I would say when both controllers were originally up and online, we actually had controller 1 in controller 0 slot. We renamed controller 1 that was in controller 0 spot, and then when we went over to controller 1, it had communicated over the it had communicated over the backplane of the chassis, and it noted that it updated its host name, but we never actually rebooted from there. So a reboot fixed our problem. We were able to start without any issues.
Combination of the reboot and the reset, the engineering reset, really.
Probably,
full
yes.
power cycle and
Yep.
physical reinstallation.
Yep.
So John Beatus, he got the Pure Array up to a state where it is actually definitely safe. Everybody is confident that
Yep.
now is a good time to connect to that array because the array is all greens. But we wanted to see that array with all the greens here in the web client, didn't we?
The crowd gave John 3 points, by the way.
John is awesome. He has shown plenty of awesome this week. So the plugin
We see the plugin, and it's
Shows
the
up
version that
here.
we expect it to be.
2.5 is installed.
Yep.
And when it pops in, I didn't remove that array before, but is it this? When we used version 2.1 of the plugin, I had to add the array, and I can't remember whether I'd removed it or not.
If we didn't remove it, so what's happening here, gang, is that in our dry run that we went through yesterday, we did actually install the 2.1. We didn't clean it up, it looks like. So
Either we didn't clean it up, or this new version of the plugin automatically adds itself.
I don't think so.
You don't
I think
think so?
the
That one-
new
it was-
version.
Tell you what, let's delete it and add it back in again. How about
Okay.
we do that?
Yeah,
We'll
let's
remove
do that. And then uninstall the plugin. That'll be fun. Let's go through that. You can uninstall
it.
the
Okay,
plugin.
let's uninstall the plugin. There we go. We
And
got our
there's that
sample flash
sample
array
flash
back that
array.
we recalled from yesterday.
Yeah.
So uninstalling, I go back to the plugin page in the Purity UI.
Yes, you would go
and
there.
Run the
And then you have to connect
again.
first.
So it hasn't stored the credentials in the array for my vCenter server, and that's nice.
Yes, that is nice.
Administrator at lab.local. And connect again. Go and authenticate and tell me that the installed version matches the available version, or that I've typed something wrong in there. And somebody out there is, oh, there we go, connected.
So let's go ahead and uninstall it.
Why would we uninstall it? Surely we're not sending back, well, I guess we might have done a proof of concept with the Pure Array and be crying as we send it back, waiting for the purchase order to happen. And I heard a story of a customer where that was happening, where they'd done the proof of concept and retired, pulled all of the workloads off the proof of concept system,
Yeah.
and sent it back, and immediately had the business unit saying, what's gone wrong? Is the network broken?
Yeah.
Because they were back to prior systems storage performance.
That's been known to happen before, as we're doing POCs and we move. There have been cases when we've moved things over as part of a POC, and things were customers were really happy. Internal customers were really happy,
They pushed production onto it.
We never want that to be part of a POC.
Yeah.
But sometimes it happens.
All right,
All right,
so we've uninstalled the plugin. Should I log out of here and log back in and see what's
Yeah,
going
why
on?
not? Yeah, let's verify.
Let's give Flash another opportunity to crash on us.
We want to flush it out so that as we're
So we know
doing
it's
this
clean.
live, that you guys really get a feel for what to expect in your environment.
So this time when we go to the home page, there should be no Pure
There should
logo
be
in there,
no-
no plugin, and of course none of the Pure iSCSI LUNs are available to us yet.
Correct.
So if we pop in back to home.
Yeah,
no
looks good.
plugin here.
Just like it was never there.
Nice and clean, no going through the managed object browser and deleting plugins off there and browsing file systems to find files the way I've had to on previous versions of vSphere as well.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's push back out the version of 2.5 that we wanted.
Yep.
Just undo those minutes of hard work that I completed. While it's pushing that, I'm going to log out of here. just save a few seconds of stream time. Local. Alright, that's completed. Installed version matches available version again.
Excellent.
And so I can log back in again here. I'm still getting used to the touchpad on this new MacBook.
Yeah.
It
And
has
it's
funny
loud.
through RDP. The MacBook's loud?
The typing, the
Oh, the
keyboards
typing?
are really
Yeah.
loud.
Alright. This time.
And there it is,
There it is,
2.5
2.5 back in.
2.5.
And we have this weird
there's
sample
that
flash array here.
Sample flash array. So the first thing we need to do before we can even remove the sample flash array, because it wants to see one there, is we go ahead and add our new array.
So this will be the brown bag. And this is the cluster IP address in here.
The cluster IP address. We don't want to put in a physical. We want the one that will roll between the two. And it's the management IP address. So,
Correct.
yeah. And then in this particular case, we're going to use the default login, the peer user login. But if you had configured Active Directory, which is an option to configure on the array, it's not part of what we're going to do today. But if you did configure Active Directory on the array, you could put in a user that you had given certain privileges to for vCenter. So we do have role-based access under Active Directory.
And the default password is the same as the username, isn't it?
Yes, in this particular case.
For this account. And now I can get rid of that sample flash array
Yes.
that was automatically added, and it was added again when we removed our. Oh, I better edit this. Can I edit the name of it? Because I've named it wrong. There we go. Edit array. As people on Twitter will have noticed, I offer typos as a service, but they are fully randomized.
Oh, yeah. You got to put in your.
Nice that you can change it. Don't have to remove it and re-edit.
Yeah. So you'll notice here that.
That's our self-signed certificate warning.
Yeah. So you'll notice here that the interface for the array that you see within vCenter is the same as if you were connecting to the IP address like we did earlier. It's just nested within vCenter. So you get all the same feature functionality plus more. And at the request of the audience, we are going to do everything else from within vCenter. So we're not even going to connect to
this tab here, which is showing exactly the same information.
Yeah.
I'm going to close that, and we'll work inside here.
So the great thing about this, I think, that as a storage administrator, right, if we have different teams that manage servers versus storage, a different vCenter team, that team can take it from here, assuming that we gave them the privileges that they need. They can really, from here, do all the management of the array that they need to do without having to work with or make requests to the storage team, if that is the type of setup that you have. Agreement that you have within your organization, right? Different organizations work differently, but certainly at this point in time, if I were a vCenter administrator, I could do everything that I needed to do just from within vCenter, the vCenter server. And as long as my storage administrator, or maybe I owned the storage myself, and I could do everything that I needed to do without having to go to another team. So there's the beauty of that. And from here, we're going to go ahead and...
Well, before we go and do something more in here, I want to remind people to have a look at our survey. Not a survey, it's a quiz. So follow the bit.ly link to the Pure Build Day quiz. And the first question in there is one that we've certainly already addressed. Can the Purity OS upgrade? No, actually, we haven't addressed the best who fills out that quiz. It goes in the draw to win the multiple of the Bluetooth headsets.
Is it just in the US, or we open it up?
Yeah, legal said that we can't send them outside of the US.
Okay.
Unfortunately, and those of us who live outside of the US are very familiar with this, that things keep simple.
There's what we're
really
giving
nice.
away.
That's the fully wireless ones, 2 separate modules, one left, one right, and no cable between them.
Fantastic.
Really nice. But of course, that would be really helpful right now to block out my left ear where that fan is over my shoulder. In the real world, of course, you'd be back at your desk at this point. You're finished with the work actually in the data center now.
Yes.
So what do we need to do now to make this flash array available to the ESX servers, not just visible in vCenter?
So what we're gonna want to do is in this particular case, there's a newer version of a plugin that's coming out that will, especially for iSCSI, that will auto discover those IQNs. But we do need to do one thing first because we haven't gotten that plugin yet. We do need to go into the storage tab of the array and create a couple of hosts, assign the IQN numbers for each of those hosts, and put those in a host group.
Before we add the information into there, let me go and gather the information from my servers.
Yes, absolutely.
So I already have iSCSI storage presented to these servers. VMHBA64 is already configured. And so in here I have the IQN for host number 1. Use the right key sequence to copy, because I'm on Windows. And then I can leap back into that Pure Storage plugin and go into, that was under storage.
You want to go under the storage tab
and add a host.
So that will be the beauty, particularly in iSCSI environments, when we get that new plugin that is coming out fairly soon, to have it auto discover all the IQNs.
That's on the next release of Purity that's coming soon.
Yes.
What have I got that's invalid characters in there?
Well,
this is a name for a host, not an IQN. That's right. Read the
host 1, right? You want to put
host 1. I do. I'm glad there's an engineer here who knows what they're doing.
And then we're going to go into the host ports tab.
Yeah,
there.
That's where I add the IQN.
And then we configure IQNs.
That's where I can paste in.
So the great thing about this is even though Alistair did say it's great to have an engineer here, the truth is a lot of this stuff is pretty intuitive. I hope from the audience perspective you guys see that it's fairly straightforward, and we try to keep it as simple as possible. There's no 4-page user's manual or a bunch of things that you have to do in advance of setting up these hosts.
But you do need to be somewhat awake as you're cutting and pasting and reusing information.
Well, the devil's always in the details, Alistair.
Indeed. And the other thing we need to do was a host group in there, didn't we?
So we do want to create a host group. So one thing to note, especially for vCenter server, they're almost always clustered. We want to create a cluster of all the ESX servers that are going to participate, a host group of all the servers that are going to participate in the cluster. And then that way, when we assign volumes or data stores, we can assign those data stores to the cluster instead of assigning those to the host. If we assign them just to the host, it makes it a private volume for things like boot from SAN and situations like that, which is certainly not something that we want to do in this type of environment.
Yeah, it makes things much more difficult to manage if you have separate presentations.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and as Alistair is doing that, another great thing about host groups is when we get into talking about snapshotting technology and things like that, when we create a protection group based off of host groups, any volume that's presented to any of the hosts within the host group automatically get protected as part of that protection group.
Okay, so we've now got the host definitions with the IQNs,
yep,
which sets up the security on, and then the follows on to be the presentations.
Yep.
Great.
So now we should go in and verify that we can rescan the bus and that we see.
We better add some discovery addresses to the hosts. So here we can figure out the target and add ourselves the discovery address for, again, the cluster.
I'm getting ahead of myself there.
There it goes. Configuration changes. We better rescan. All right, let's rescan.
And there's our 223 address.
223 address is in the dynamic discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the static discovery, we should see some You know what? That's not the iSCSI address.
Oh, we missed a step.
We've only
We're
configured
totally
the
getting
management network.
So go back to the array. Sorry, team. We're getting way ahead. We're getting really excited. We do need to go in and actually configure the iSCSI network on the array in order for it to communicate with.
So remember, we've got the copper RJ45 connections for management.
Yep.
And although we've only got one of those connected, there are a pair.
Yep.
Plus we have the QSFPs for the iSCSI or fiber channel.
Correct.
So we need to configure those. I'm guessing that's in system configuration.
That is
and maybe
in
there's
system.
connections, but
we're actually going to go to
configuration.
And then we're going to go to network.
There we go.
And then when we see the network, it automatically picked those up because it was partially configured yesterday. But ordinarily, what you guys would see is that you would see the management interfaces. If you look over here far to the right, you see the service there. We would see those management addresses populated, but the actual iSCSI IPs would be blank. And that's when we would go ahead, Alistair, and go over to CT0ETH4. And if you, there should be a button on there. In this particular case, we may need to go actually to the web interface. I thought it should all be able to be done within there. Edit. Yeah, so go ahead and edit. It's just in a different spot.
Yeah.
So then we would put in the address of the iSCSI that we wanted to communicate on, and we would do that across all the ports that we have configured for iSCSI. And then from there, that's when we should be able to. So are these, they look like they're enabled already.
These are the correct addresses because these are persisted out of the dry run.
Okay.
So when we ran the dry run for this, it was a simple case of enter the 4 IP addresses, one for each of the physical network adapters.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that we did have to do, because the switch that's in the middle of this is not configured for jumbo frames, it's only configured for 1500 byte frames. The default in here on the release we did the dry run on was to use 9000 byte jumbo frames, which is the vSphere maximum size. And we don't have that enabled on my switch.
Yeah.
And consequently, it wasn't going to work.
Right, which is the best practices actually for iSCSI environments. We do want jumbo frames configured. And when you do configure jumbo frames, you do have to have it configured on every switch within the path from the host all the way to the array. So just something to keep in mind.
It's another thing that I need to look at on my lab as I'm making changes to it. So if we come back into the iSCSI configuration and targets, and we add one of the IP addresses, and of course I could copy and paste it out of that edit dialog.
Yep.
Away it goes, adds that, and now when we rescan, what we should see in the static discovery is some 172 addresses, all of the 172 addresses.
Yep.
Is there a best practice about that dynamic discovery setting more than one IP address in there, or do we just set one and the system will recognize or identify all of the controllers from that?
Well, I know on the next version it will auto-discover, but on this one I don't know that there's a...
My personal preference is to have the dynamic discovery have all of the IP addresses of the array, just in case a cable is out when this ESX server reboots next.
Right.
Last thing I want is it not to be able to discover its iSCSI lines.
Exactly.
And that's one of my hosts, and the other host in the cluster exactly the same. Go to targets, and in static discovery, add that same, place, add that same IP. And again, do the rescan. And confirm that my static discovery now shows all of my controller ports. Great.
Yeah, so we should be good to go. Now at this point in time, now we can go back to where we really wanted to go when we were so excited to just go ahead and create our data stores. And we definitely want to do the rest from here within vCenter server. So we're going to go back into the plugin. And actually, I think what we did last time was we actually right-clicked on the, if you close out of that, was if we go back to
we don't go back to the array to create
cluster. Yeah,
surely.
we go back to the cluster itself. And if we right-click on the cluster and go all the way down to the bottom there, we can go to Pure Storage, and then we can go ahead and create our data store.
That seems like a good plan. So that's the plugin in action, making changes to the user interface,
yep.
And allowing us to have system-specific user interface. So data store name, Pure 01.
Now, Alistair is going to create whatever data store he wants to create as part of this.
400 terabytes. Maybe not.
Well, VMware does have some, yes, there is, but there's not a Pure restriction on that one, and that is important for you guys to understand. Is that for Pure, we don't really care what size of a volume you have. We do have limitations on quantity of volumes, quantity of hosts, and things like that, but they're really, really super high into the thousands on a single array. But the actual size of the volume makes no difference to us. And I know one of the things that used to come up a lot for customers was they would want to create more volumes because there was queuing for each volume. And there were other arrays that had queue limitations on a per volume basis. But in Pure, we don't have a per volume queue limit. Literally, a single volume could take up all of the queues on the array as a whole. So you could create a single volume, which can help in a lot of cases, like in VDI type of environments. It makes it
much simpler to manage, and you don't end up with issues. Well, you wouldn't end up with issues around isolated free space that you get on other arrays as well, would you?
Correct.
Because everything is sitting on one large pool of storage, and it's just a logical division of that large pool of storage. Right. That's nice. That takes away some of the pain. But I can't set any kind of tunables on here. I can't say that I want this to have tiering or be spread across different RAID groups or anything. I'm just setting a size.
That's right. You're just setting a size.
No other controls?
No other controls. That's part of the efficiency, guys, about this array, right? If we had all the different knobs, you guys would quickly be in 400, 500-page books trying to figure out what's the knob I need to turn to get this thing to go. And you'll notice, go ahead and create your volume that you want to create there. And you'll notice that volume, it gets created. We never had to really talk about, let's look at the back end layout. How are we going to carve up, and do separation, or where does all this data live? So, I mean, even when we add another, which we will later on today, we're going to add another data pack, and we're not talking about, now all the new volumes we need to create in the data pack to distribute the workload. All of that distribution happens as part of the Purity operating system. There's no penalty, performance penalty in having it work that way. That's the way it was designed. And you actually can't turn it off. So things like the data reduction, the automatic QoS that we have in place as part of the Purity operating system, all of that stuff is part of the operating system, and they cannot be turned off. So they're always on. RAID 3D, which allows us to have 3D for us allows us to have N+2 protection, so we can lose 2 drives before we're actually at risk of losing data. So all of those things that for resiliency and performance and protection are all included as part of the Purity operating system and can never be turned off. So less knobs, simplicity means you guys can focus on other things in your organization.
So even with all of the challenges that we had, that we needed John to come in and clean up after the pre-work, which chewed up probably 45 minutes. We've been live for under an hour and a half, and we have 4 terabytes of storage presented to my ESXi servers now.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. And I've had to enter IP addresses, system name, and the size of data store and the IQNs.
Yep.
Yeah, that was quick and easy.
Yeah, so back to simplicity, right? We want to focus on other things in the environment.
It's interesting that we see what the hyperconverged vendors would say is a legacy structure, still delivering real simplicity, real fast time to value. I've been sort of thinking around how much of the value proposition of hyperconverged is about putting the storage inside the compute and how much is around operational simplicity. And I think the real value is around operational simplicity. And here we have the very definition of operational simplicity.
Yeah, but without having to scale in different ways, right?
it's-
So there's certainly trade-offs for those kinds of things, but
Yeah, it's interesting
all
to
your
see
simplicity that you would ever need.
the big benefits turning up. All right, so now I've got my storage from my Pure. There we go. Get to the data store list, and so I have my 4 terabyte data store here available for me. So I've got this bunch of underperforming virtual machines that I need to migrate.
Yeah.
And so you can understand that I have a script that I've built in the past that I use to migrate virtual machines around, and I've got this migrate all script here. And the destination for my migration is a data store called Pure01. It's not an overly sophisticated script. It just takes a list of virtual machines and migrates them from whatever data store they're on now to the Pure-01 data store. And that's this sort of bunch in the middle here. And then it also clones a template from my source out onto the same Pure1 data store. And then what do we do? Oh, then it's going to deploy a bunch of virtual machines. But I've got it
from the template, right?
Yeah, I got it to pause before it does that deploy from template.
Okay.
So we'll see that kick off. And then when it's done all of that, I got it to copy some more stuff because there's a few more VMs I want to move, but they're not quite so important. So
well, the great thing is I think we should try to push this thing as much as we possibly can. Although I think that your NAS is going to be...
I got to be gentle on my NAS. It's not very flash, although it has got SSDs as the storage. It's not as well engineered as an enterprise array, and it really is not coping particularly well with the volume of virtual machines that I'm running. So I'm going to just sequentially move one VM at a time, but I will continuously move those virtual machines. There we go. Run the migrate all script. Connect to vCenter. About to move 9 virtual machines. Yes, please. And what we should see... interesting. I got a typo in one of the migrations. So,
hey, it wouldn't be any fun if we didn't have a few hiccups here and there.
you know what? I think I might have failed to take out a comment line on my move stuff. Yeah, I failed to take out a comment, so I'm just going to kill that. When I was testing the changes to my script yesterday before, after I put it all together, I commented out the move.
Oh.
So to make sure that my change script logic would work, and now that hasn't run. There we go, so let's try that again. Connect to vCenter, move 9 virtual machines. Okay, let's do template. I've definitely messed up my script. Let's exit the script at that point and see what error it's showing. Data store, nation data store. So that's what I haven't done. I haven't done a get data store line, so I need to add in here data store equals get dash data store name is destination data store name. And I'll just add a read host in here. Did it work? Save that. And let's run that again. Move 9 VMs. That's better. Move my vCenter appliance. We can see the relocate task going on for the relocate VCSA down
pull
here.
that up so we can. Is there just the 2 tasks there, or is there
So
quite a few more?
there are only 2 running in there. The clone of the template that I'm actually going to cancel because that was from a previous run of the script. That will happen again later in this run. So now I've got them just running sequentially, so I don't blow up my NAS and have it overheat and kill another SSD.
It's already hot in here anyway.
It
so.
is fairly warm in here, and my NAS is a little inclined to overheat. See what it's telling us now. And the limiting factor in the time to migrate these VMs is the performance of my NAS. It's absolutely not the pure array. So we can see that my NAS is running. It's doing 113 megabytes a second of send out of the storage network. So you'd hope that the VM's gonna move across.
Yeah. Which is something to keep in mind, right? Whenever I've been out in the field and working with customers, a lot of times they'll say, oh, it's, not a lot of times on these migrations particularly, that's when it comes up is, hey, I expected it to be quicker. And we have to remember that you can only go as fast as your smallest pipe.
Yes.
So if our smallest pipe is the source array, or even in iSCSI, the network, the jumbo frames, there's a lot of other factors that need to be taken into consideration before we feel like we're just not getting out of the array what we want it to. And then certainly once the migration is complete and we're doing things like vMotions and things like that, then we would expect it to be much better.
Yeah, once it's all the pure array,
Yeah.
then it's down to the performance of the pure array.
Yep.
And we can see we're ingesting data at 70 megabytes a second. So given that the NAS is on gigabit Ethernet, we'd expect the maximum throughput that's possible is gated by that 1 gig Ethernet.
And we also only have one going at a time. They're serial, so.
Well, with one filling the gig Ethernet isn't, 5 filling a gig Ethernet isn't going to net faster than 1 filling the gig Ethernet.
Right.
So
But that's okay, right? We can do some more stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we have a load.
So we were going to look at what happens when something goes wrong, because it's all very well to say when everything goes right, here's what it looks like.
Right.
It's
and
a
that's
whole
the
other
whole
story.
point, right? Of today's workshop is to
go do some more interesting and different things.
I'm really good at destructive things, so I
That's
think
good. That's good. It's a good skill for an engineer.
so. I think at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and fail a component.
Yeah.
And the particular component that we're planning on failing is the primary controller. So for those of you that don't know it, here it has 2 controllers. A lot of people like to ask about 2 controllers. Is it active-active or is it active-passive? For Pure, it's both. On the front end, it's active-active. We take I/O in from hosts on both controllers. On the back end, just similar to a database, only one person can be in charge at any point in time. So only one of the controllers is active with respect to updating the metadata and metadata tables within the array, keeping track of the data reduction, the logical block addresses of where the data lives, and things of that nature. So it's actually both. In this particular case, what we want to do to simulate a failure is we're going to pretend like the controller that is running and updating the metadata tables within the array, it happens to just crash. It dies. And so we want to show what that's going to look like and how the array is going to perform and react to that type of failure. So whenever you're ready.
Let's take a look at what we've got in
System health.
System health.
So we're going to look at the system health of the array.
Let's look at the configuration and identify that CT0 is our primary and CT1 is our secondary.
Excellent.
Which means the top controller.
Well, when we get back there, we'll
one.
verify they're labeled. So.
But remember, we've got them
Nope,
reversed
we
out.
renamed them.
Renamed
That
them.
was part of the process.
Cool.
Yep.
So they're the right way around now.
Yep.
All right.
So we are going to be pulling CT0. And while we do that, Alistair, if we want to keep the dashboard view
I think
up.
the dashboard view is the right one to see the I/O going on, and we can see throughput's not huge.
We may want to in this particular case, just because of the font sizes are a little
It's a little hard to see with all of the extra.
Yeah, so if you do want to
around
go
it.
ahead and just open up the web client in this case, just so that it's easy for you folks to see what's going on. We want you guys watching this while we do have that component failure. You'll notice there's power failures. We'll talk about that as we do this upgrade, or as we do this failure, because not only are we going to fail, we're going to pull a component out and we're going to run and we're going to watch and see what has what happens to it.
What
But
happens to the workload?
we're going to pretend like when that component failed, we're going to replace it with an even beefier controller. So today we're running on an M50, and we're going to replace it with an M70 controller.
So the M50 is the sort of middle of the range.
Yep.
Yeah, not the fastest, not the cheapest.
Correct. So
Products
in
the
our
range.
M product line, we have the M10, the M20, the M50, and the M70. Most customers, there's not very many customers who are doing the M10s, but M20, M50, so we're in the middle of the road here, and then our beefiest being the M70. So are we ready?
Yeah.
Alistair, do
do
you
a
want to
fail.
do the honors?
Well, I have not actually pulled one of these out, so yes, please.
Yeah, come on over.
Probably best if just one of us stands behind there because it's awfully close. And also, Jeff's probably going to make mute me while I'm behind there in the noise.
Let's just make sure that we do one thing, and that is, yes, controller 0. So we do have it screwed in this component. One thing to note for you guys is as we're doing these component, simulating a component failure, all the replaceable parts are identified by an orange tag. Jeffrey, I don't know if you can zoom in on me over here in the front of this. But if you look at the front of the array here, we're going to be right in here.
While Jeff's setting that scene up, you can see that we've now got a red state on controller 0 because it's been pulled out. And you may have seen the UI just flicker because it was the active node. That's the one we were getting the user interface from. The virtual IP had to fail over to the other node in order for the user interface to update.
So here, what we're seeing is the front of the array. You'll notice that all of these orange tabbed
Jeff,
components,
you wanna go live
right?
on that
So
shot?
the flash modules themselves, these are the 2 NVRAM. In the back, there's similar components as well. That they're in the back, the controllers are actually screwed in, so they're tightened up, so somebody can't bump them or anything like that. People in the data center working don't have an accident. But each of those components, you need to work with the orange tab to remove those particular devices, which happens to be what Alistair just did. So he unplugged, unseated the CT0, and we can see from our GUI here that CT0 is out. So Alistair, why don't you go ahead and pull that controller out? One thing that we want to do, just as being a good administrator, is we actually do want to go into the control center or vSphere and check and make sure that our hosts pass, that we are seeing those paths that are failed, and then that everything is up and still running the way we would expect it to. And then I'll actually pass you the FlashArray M70 controller.
Completely out.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 70 here, exactly
70?
the same shape
Exactly the
and
same
feel.
chassis.
And
Different components. So the processor speed within the M70, the amount of memory that's in the M70, it's just a beefier server, if you will. So,
all right, I'll go back into the pit. While I'm there, I'll plug just the management interface back in, or should I plug the iSCSI interfaces as well?
I would do just the management until we get
All
the
right.
controller back up and online and it has joined the cluster. And if you could, while you're back there, go ahead and change the adapter for our console so that we can run the commands that we need to run.
And of course, you know it's running with the up sound of fans going on.
Yeah, sorry.
Everybody, put your tray tables in the upright positions. We're about ready to take off.
Yeah, there's certainly a strong breeze coming out of the back of there, and the blinds are blowing around behind. This equipment really isn't designed to be in a meeting room.
So while the server is booting, couple things I think that we should talk about here, and maybe I won't stand so close to the fans, is that when something like this happens, the experience that you would get is you're going to get support calling you saying, we've noticed that you've lost the controller. What they're going to ask you to do, and I'll ask Alistair to do the same thing, is they're going to ask you to open up a remote assist connection. This is the reference that I made earlier to, we can't get into the array unless you open the door. So we're going to open that connection, which would allow our support teams to dial into the array and to start figuring out what went wrong.
Jeff, back to my screen then.
So this is actually going to be on the System tab, Alistair. We can go to that.
I have a feeling my page hasn't updated because it's just refreshed my page.
That's okay.
Might need to explicitly go to.
Was 2.3 our VIP? Or did we change it?
2.3 is the VIP, but it's not responding to me at this point. You know how we switched IP addresses? I wonder if the controller we just put back in has the same IP address configured on the controller we've just taken out.
Well, it's okay because we won't see the management interface, but I can down the interface when it gets up.
It won't be up now at the moment.
So we're not
anyway,
impacting iSCSI at all at this point in time if we do have an IP conflict because we changed
because
the
Purity
IP.
is not running at this point.
It may come up and start up as running, but we'll shut it down as soon as it starts up. But even when it starts up, the IP address will already be configured. So we'll just down the interface and we should be fine. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and log into this here. Can you try again?
All right.
So it's actually shut down. Is it connecting for you?
I still don't have the interface up.
It is up.
I'm not getting the web interface up on 223.
This is CT0. Not that it should matter, but let's just replace it with CT1. Or this one is the M70 CT1. We're going to replace it with CT0. Jeffrey, if you want to mute me, I'm going to go back and pull that controller.
So once again, we're being bitten by the fact that we did a dry run of this and didn't completely clean the dry run up to factory clean state. One of the fun things is I think we've still got lots of I/O going on. So we actually have, I believe, still migrations in progress and VMs moving. Just trying to confirm that the iSCSI traffic is still actually running.
Okay, so Alistair, were we able to get connected to the IP address?
Should I be able to ping the management IPs?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, none of them are responding at the moment.
The array is up.
Remove both. The when you pulled it down. Oh, but
Guys, what we had happen was when Alistair was back there, this is something that we run the risk of having happen all the time, is that when he was replacing controller 0, the reason we couldn't connect to the web client is because he inadvertently pulled the management connection for both controller 0 and controller 1.
Oh,
I still have.
this is why I work as a writer and video driver rather than being allowed loose in data centers these days.
But the great thing is when we connect back up, we can tell we knew the array was up because we were able to check the status of the array command line via our console. But the great thing for the rest of the audience that you can see there is that even though the management interface ports were down, we didn't actually impact any IO to the vSphere or any of the guests.
The only gap we can see in there is where we first pulled what was the primary controller. There's a gap in the graph here when it switched over and the secondary took over as primary.
And that gap does get refreshed and filled in later once they synchronize.
Right.
The information gets synchronized.
So now we're ready. We're getting the boot on the M70 controller.
Yes. So now we're booting the M70 controller. So CT0 is getting replaced from an M50 to an M70. Alistair, did we go in and do the remote assist? Did we open that port?
We did not.
That was one thing that we were talking about doing.
We're talking about as the UI
didn't respond.
Didn't respond because I pulled the cables out.
So
who knew it wasn't a wireless system?
Any failure that we would have, whether it is a fiber channel cable or card or port, or an iSCSI card or port, a controller, NVRAM, a flash module, any of these kinds of things that create an event on the array, support will get notified. And the first thing they're going to do is they do have the ability to look through some of the logs that are already shipped back to support and to peer. But they're going to call the customer and say, hey, we noticed an event on your hardware. Can you please open up a door for us to get in and do some further investigation, which is what we're going to enable here. So if we go to the configuration tab there, support connectivity. And then we're going to remote assist. We're going to enable that remote assist, which then allows, and by the way, when you enable remote assist, if you forget about it and go on about your day, 72 hours later, that door will close automatically. So that door closes automatically after 72 hours so that you aren't vulnerable from a security perspective. So the controller is up now. We're going to go ahead and log in. Now, keep in mind that as you guys are looking at this console here, you see that it already has a name. But if this were shipped to us from the factory, it would come and it would have some different serial number name at the prompt, and it wouldn't actually show V Brown Bag. And now at this point in time, remember that we talked about, or I don't think we actually did talk about, that Pure has 2 controllers. And the reason that we can do these code upgrades or these array upgrades is because the controllers themselves contain nothing about the array within them. So we call that they're stateless. They have no information about the array housed within them. So we can pull them and replace them with whatever we want without impacting the array as a whole, or without us having to manipulate and move information about the configuration of the array around. All the information about the array is stored on the flash drives themselves. So by us adding in this new M70 controller, we're going to run a few commands here. Those commands are basically going to communicate with the flash drives and say, give me my configuration information. Who am I? Who should I come up as? It's going to get all that information and then go on about its day. So
So, like any good engineer, Stacey has a nice little cheat sheet of commands to use.
yeah, this is, I mean, even though Peer is pretty amazing, I don't think it would be good if I ran the wrong command, right? It was run the rest.
Particularly if this was, well, it is a production customer's storage. It's got my vCenter server on it now. But I also noticed as we were working through this the other day that these commands do actually have help. And it
Yes.
does seem to be pretty
So-
relevant help.
So if we ran dash help here on this particular command, it would give us some options. I think it's actually dash help.
Yeah, normal Linux is dash if it's a sentence. So it's actually barfing on the from controller. You probably have to have the help at the beginning, not at the end.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And yeah, 2 dashes for help, 1 dash for just H. Yeah.
Syntax is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I want to the command that we're actually going to run here, and I want to walk you guys through this. This is a command that a pure implementation engineer or a pure support person would actually run on the array controller.
And this is definitely the sort of command that would only be run in conjunction with a support call for any kind of production environment.
Yeah, well, correct. I mean, that is one important thing to point out to you guys is you notice that I logged in as root on the array. I logged in as root via a console that's directly connected to the array. You can't log in as root to the array. Even if you log in as pure user on the array, you can't SU to root via any kind of console that isn't directly attached to the front of the array. And we don't normally give out the root password to anybody because that's where our proprietary, that's the Purity operating system lives. There's a lot of risk in doing that. So this command isn't even available to anybody besides somebody with root access to the array for good reason, right? Because a lot of things can go horribly wrong. This particular command, just to walk you guys through the syntax of this, it's pure setup, and we're going to do a replace. So when we first installed the array, if you guys remember, we ran a pure setup, but we ran pure setup new array and pure setup secondary. Now we're running pure setup. We're going to replace the controller, and then we're going to tell it where are we going to get the information about who I want to be. We're going to get it from that M50 that's currently was the previous version of the controller that we had installed. And then this no-check here is just because we're having a lot of fun here with the V Brown Bag team. And because we're having a lot of fun, we decided we're going to go from M50s to M70s. And our M70 controllers are quite a bit beefier. And they do require a power supply that does need 240 watt. 220 voltage. So we happen to be connected to a power strip that is 110. So this script does have a lot of checks in it to make sure that somebody doesn't shoot themselves in the foot. And so we're going to force it to ignore the warnings on the power because we're not plugged into 220. So that's what this is about. And I think there was actually a question earlier asking what the no check was, and that's what it is. It's we're running a non-recommended power type setup. So
yeah.
We have to force it a little bit.
Don't run your pure storage array in a conference room in production.
Yeah, if anybody's running, an M70 can run quite a beefy workload. If anybody's running that type of workload, A, I hope you're not doing it in a carpet conference room, and B, I hope you have 220 power.
Yeah, not a problem for us in conference rooms in New Zealand because our standard single phase is 230 volts, so you get enough out of that.
No, we did not want to. So while this is picking up, and did you guys see how quickly that happened? I mean, I just want to take a minute and really talk about what we just did there. We basically upgraded the brains of our array from an M50 to an M70 with a single command within seconds of completion.
So it's what, 10 minutes it's taken us to go from an M50 to currently a Franken array of M50 and M70 controller.
Yeah, and let's go back to our
And
GUI.
back onto the GUI.
Did we see a blip in performance?
Oh, I was just looking at the configuration tab in here and seeing that my primary is the M50 and the secondary is the M70 and it is this Franken controller, but it is all healthy.
It's all healthy. Now,
And IOs are still IOing.
IOs are still IOing. We do see all these alerts. Go back to the system tab because I do want to point this out. This is really important here. Again, because this is an array that we were working with and playing with over the past several days to try and make sure the equipment was going to work for us today, it already sees a lot of the disks that we don't have installed in the array.
And that's the orange,
orange
disks and the 2 orange NVRAMs that you see here in the right-hand side. That earlier on we saw them orange and then we were able to clear them away when we said it was actually an M50.
Yes, exactly. So now it thinks that it's seeing those devices. And if you guys were getting a pristine new controller that hadn't participated in any kind of array before, that information isn't going to be there, and you're not going to have that
Because these M70
problem.
controllers came from even further afield. They were somewhere in Europe before we had them.
Yes, exactly. So you do notice that the system is up and running. We did replace it from the M50. I do want to reboot the secondary controller because I want to see if we can get rid of these orange, the knowledge about those other devices that aren't there anymore to go away.
Reboot the old M50 that's currently our primary.
The new
The
M70. The M70 is the one that's communicating.
Out of date information. So a reboot should have it reload its config from what it read off the SSDs.
Correct.
And then say, yeah, the correct hardware is present. So that's the Purity OS is down on the M70.
So I'm now rebooting that M70.
Now doing the Linux restart.
Yep. I'm going to wait for it to come back up. I'm going to wait for it to rejoin the cluster and everything is healthy. We're going to watch and monitor our system tab here and interface.
Okay.
And then at that point in time, we're going to simulate similarly that we have another catastrophic controller failure and that it needs to be replaced.
Needs to be replaced again with an M70.
Exactly.
What we're going to talk about during these pauses. We've got questions from the field?
The questions.
Oh yes, more of the questions. I keep getting so caught up in this building a storage array that I keep forgetting that there's more questions out there in that bit.ly link at Pure Build Day, and that head across to that bit.ly link. That'll take you to SurveyMonkey where you can answer some of these questions and get yourself in the drawing for that Bluetooth headset. Because I've mentioned so few of them, I'm going to pop across to, this is question 2, where the storage replication adapters are installed.
We're going to press on at this point in time because the array is healthy, and I'd like for you to come with me and look at the prompt right here, because we are checking the health of the array as we move along, and we are also monitoring and watching how our vCenter server is responding as well. So we're going to run the PureADM status on CT0. This is the M70 that we just upgraded to. We notice that all of our daemons are running. The array is healthy. If we do a PureDB list mode, it's going to tell us this particular controller is participating in the cluster, and it's the secondary in the controller. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and Alistair is going to simulate us failing the now current. So if I run this SSH to my peer controller, which is CT1. I do peer DB list, and I see that this guy is participating as the primary. Alistair is going to go ahead and say, go ahead and kill CT1.
Okay.
And we're just going to simulate something catastrophic happened, and our second controller has
bottom
now
controller,
died.
which is currently live.
Yes. And don't pull both Ethernet cables. That would be
All right, I'm
fantastic.
going into the darkness.
Okay, go into the darkness. Oh, we didn't have the iSCSI connected, did we? Before we actually pull every good system administrator would do this. Before we actually pull the second controller, we need to make sure that the paths, the existing paths that we have, are healthy, and the paths to the new M70 controller are also healthy, and that hosts can see them, so that we don't run into a situation where we lose all of our paths. Yeah, let's not pull that one until we verify that our hosts are happy. Oh, it's too late. Okay. Can we look here and see? Make sure that this is all good. Okay, so we do see that we have failed that other controller. Our related objects can be seen here. The status of that Peer 1 volume looks like it's normal. So we did have redundancy. And seems like we're doing okay.
And you can see that some of the virtual machines have actually migrated across already. So although it's going slowly, the migration is proceeding.
Okay, I'll let you look within there. And
Down here is the migrations proceeding.
okay, that window.
And then there we go. I've successfully pulled the lower controller. So we're running on one controller now.
Good. All right, now we're going to replace the controller with the new controller. Man, Alistair, I'm really working you hard, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, I'm the junior engineer here who knows the least, so I should be put in the noisy and hot places to do these things.
No, you're the customer. The customer is doing it.
Oh, in that case, I'm doing it because I'm excited to be playing with hardware.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, back into the darkness, and I'm not going to be able to hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Well, we didn't delay so very long.
Do you need help with cables, getting them out of the way? And okay, and the management is too. Thank you. Okay, so while that's booting, since we now are in a state where there's two M70s, let's go ahead and add our NVRAM devices to the front. They're over here. I have them.
Because the M70 is being higher performance, needs the 2 sets of NVRAM in it.
Correct.
Also
So-
a reason why it needs more power.
Also a reason why it needs more power. So if you guys can see me here, I don't know, Jeffrey, if you have this on. Well,
Yeah,
so
open it
we're
up.
basically removing these.
Front of chassis.
We're removing the placeholders here for the NVRAM module. And then this is really cool. I wish if I could open this up. If you can zoom in on this, Jeffrey, this is really cool. So this is our NVRAM device. here, right? It's one of the NVRAM device. I don't want to open this up, but I do want to point out to you, if you zoom in there, what you see right here, this device right here is a super cap battery packed. It's a battery, so that when we write to the NVRAM, if we were to have catastrophic power failure, we would have enough time to write from in, and in here also is another flash chip. So when we write to the NVRAM can only hold the information for so long, right? Certain number of hours. So
what you've usually got is a real DIMM,
right,
that is made non-volatile by the ability to destage it. So you have a battery that keeps the DIMM powered, but also powers the SSD, the tiny bit of flash that you destage out of the standard DIMM.
correct. But in this case, we've got the NVMe RAM in there, NVRAM, and then we have that capacity power, the capacity-backed power that gives us the time that we need, the extra power that we need to destage to the...
So if the power is lost from the module, it'll use that capacitor's charge to destage out of the DIMM into a piece of flash that'll be persistent forever. And when we pull those out...
It's a little UPS.
It is sort of a little UPS for it.
Exactly right.
And when we pull those modules out of the array yesterday, there's a little LED on the side that you can't see because it's not lit at the moment, just behind the
you're looking
behind
right
the label there. That was lit for several minutes after the module was taken out of the server because there was enough capacitor power to keep it lit as well as do the destage.
Yeah.
I'm sure the destage finished in a second or two, but there was plenty more capacity for it.
So now we're going to go ahead and put in these NVRAM devices here. You did a much better job of explaining that, Alistair, than I was.
Well, years of being a trainer, you learn to explain stuff. Although you also learn to talk too much.
Why is that not?
Is there a release that has to be released before it slides in?
Oh my God.
There we go. Clicked in.
Clicked. That one's powering up. That one's powering up. How do we
currently an orange status and an amber status, and that's reflected in the UI.
And while that's running, I'm going to go back to our console and log in. And while that is taking place, we're going to go ahead and run that same command that we did before. And we're going to tell it to replace this secondary controller. And we're actually going to replace it from the same, and we're not going to replace it from now the new controller, but the original M50.
So there used to be an M50 that was CT1.
Yes.
And please take the personality of the M50 that was CT1 and upgrade that personality to an M70.
Correct. And those of you that are joining us just recently, we're doing the no check because we have it plugged into improper power. The M70 requires 220 and we have it on 110. So it will fail the checks and it won't let us proceed. So we want to proceed because this is part of our live day. And of course not in a production type environment. So we're going to continue on.
So much the same of the getting the Purity OS started up, but of course because there's already on that that pack of storage, the SSDs, there's already the IP configuration and all of those things. We don't have to enter any of that information. It's just take the identity that you had. Oddly, it does still ask us if we want to change our time zone. Let's go for a no to continuing to change time zone. Right, you gave it a yes, the same as I did. You say no to the...
Say no to this one?
Yeah.
But it says current time zone is Europe.
It'll just change the user interface, won't it? Just change the way time is... You can go for a... Because we changed the other one. The other one's in LA.
Yeah. This is actually going to require a reboot. So it will come up on the proper time zone.
So you could see where in Europe that this array was last being used.
All right, so while that's happening, let's go ahead and go back over to our interface. And we notice that the NVRAM modules are still trying to join the cluster.
Still showing in amber. And just before we switched, everything was showing green in here because at that stage purity was up and in sync.
Right.
It's just that change of time zone has caused this reboot, which has now brought us back to a red state on that controller.
So do we have a workload still running on our vCenter?
We have virtual machines still being migrated across. The virtual machine we're actually using to run all of this management interface, this Windows 7 machine, has been on the Pure Array. It was the second machine to be migrated across.
Okay.
So we've not lost any I/O. This virtual machine is performing a little better than it did before. And I imagine my vCenter server is a little more responsive than it was before because that was the first thing I migrated.
Yeah. So do we also want to go ahead and go to the dashboard so we can see that the performance is just humming along there?
But I/O, we're seeing really still all of the I/O is constrained by my source NAS.
And we're still getting sub-millisecond response time, which is really what we're going for.
Even true, because that's one of the design objectives is to never breach 1 millisecond latency on any I/O.
Ideally.
Ideally.
Although, you know.
It's a design objective, not a requirement.
Right. It goes back to this latency today. And I wonder if we should go ahead and log into Pier 1 at this point in time, too.
Sure.
To show that you can see the performance. Also from more of a dashboard view from anywhere, by the way. On your mobile device, we do have a mobile app called Pier 1. Do you have the Pier 1 login information? Is that on the Pure Tech? You connected to Pure Tech the other day with John. That would give the ability to log into Pier
1. I was just connecting to that for access to Cody's jump host.
I bet you I could log into it for you on your laptop. Do you want to try that?
Let's. That was the F5.
Actually, you don't even have to do that, I don't think.
Yeah. So we'll stay inside the Windows 7 machine.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So
why don't you drive? I really like that background image. And nice to see the use of two-factor authentication throughout.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna log in as a different user.
So as usual, connecting to web services from an unfamiliar laptop is a little bit of a challenge, getting to the right places. And this is another thing that we didn't quite manage to dry run. And so Stacey's doing this from my laptop for the first time and probably looking at this array for the very first time. So there'll be a moment or three to find that, I imagine. So it's pretty cool that we've upgraded in place this array from M50 controllers to an M70. The I/O has carried on throughout. We've managed the entire process from a virtual machine running on top of the array that we're upgrading. This is kind of replacing the spaceship while we're in flight, which is a reasonably cool thing to be able to do. And
so as we took that short intermission and you guys got to spend a little bit of time with Joel McKelvey, we were just doing a few things to prep. We have some more exciting stuff to show you. Before we get started, I do want to share with you, we're going to take you back to Alistair's desktop here, Jeffrey, if we could. And we're going to go ahead and look at the health of the array. So before we left, we had updated the time zone of that second controller. The array is now back up and mostly healthy. It looks like this NVRAM may need to be reseated, so it looks like it's updating. We're going to just let it do its thing at this point in time. As far as our vSphere client is concerned, if it refreshes.
Other than being Flash-based vSphere client.
Yes, it is a little bit faster.
And if you pop into that PowerShell window at the bottom there, that's the copy progressing, and it's progressing along. Those 3 VMs are the largest VMs. Yeah, it's still the migrations are going.
So we're chugging away, basically, is where we landed at. If we go back to the array itself, we see that it's healthy. That NVRAM recovered in just those few seconds that we were looking around. If we go back to the dashboard here, all of these alerts were things that we accumulated over all the work that we did throughout this process. So I'm going to show you how to clear those. If you go to the Messages tab here, we do have the ability, they're just flagged. We're going to click on the very top here, and we're going to go ahead and say, clear this flag. If we go back to the dashboard now, it's clean. So as we progress and as the health of our array, these messages will remain out there from a log perspective. We can see what everything happened, but we don't want them making our dashboard look too crazy or too messy. Our performance is continuing to move along. The thing that I wanted to show you, because the next thing that we have planned for you guys is, I hope, and I'm sure Alistair as a customer, you're excited about this, and I hope everybody out there is really excited about what we just did there, right? We just upgraded the brains of an array while we were serving I/O to very critical applications, by the way, right? I mean, this is your lab environment.
Well, this is running my business. If this wasn't running now, we wouldn't have a show.
Right.
So absolutely, this is an in-place upgrade from a mid-range to an upper-range array. During a working day, all the I/O is still operational. I'm not sure if this was a production environment, I'd necessarily choose to do it at such a critical time when we're doing a live stream.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I didn't have to schedule an 8-hour outage in order for us to do this. And
the point is, you can, right? There are some organizations out there that it doesn't matter if it's Saturday, Sunday, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
There is no outage window.
There is no outage window. So hopefully you guys are excited about what we just did there. The next thing that we want to show you guys is that we can do an operating system upgrade, as well as not just the hardware, but we can do the same thing to the operating system without impact to the workload. So that's the next thing that we're going to do. But before we do that, I do want to take you guys into, we have what I was working on while we took the Joel McKelvey break was I wanted to give you guys another thing that Pure offers. And by the way, all these things that we're talking about, they're free. We're not charging you additional licensing. So what the view that I just took you to on Alistair's desktop here is Pure One Manage. Pure One Manage actually lives out in the cloud. It's locked down, so you have to log in with your credentials, just like you guys saw me trying to log in as Stacy at Pure Storage. That's your credentials. When I'm logged in as my user, I can see the arrays that are within my environment. So for you, you have, if you were a customer, Alistair, I'd go into vBrownBag within our tools, and I would say Alistair as a user is assigned to see the vBrownBag array. And then you can, as you accumulate more arrays, you're going to see all the arrays that you would have in your environment. And when I'm going to need
a lot of space to store all the videos of these build days. So
right.
I can imagine I'd need a couple of arrays.
It's going to be fantastic. So there's many different views. We have this card view here where you just get a sense of, hey, all these cards are essentially the arrays within my environment. These cards are just a quick ability for me to look at how my arrays are performing. I see here the capacity utilization, my average data reduction. And oh, by the way, when we talk about data reduction pure, we're talking about deduplication and compression. We do not include thin provisioning in any of the data reduction numbers that we publish as part of our data reduction overall
and
numbers.
you also don't identify zero detection as data reduction either, which is really nice. That if I thick provision my disks and eager zero them, which is the best practice on Pure, you're not accounting all of those zeros as a data reduction because that's not actually my data.
Yeah, actually for Flash, right? The Purity operating system sees those zeros come in. We tell you as a best practice, create your data stores and set them up as eager zero thick. That way we don't take a penalty when we go to make our next write that we actually have to write a zero first to say, just do that out of the gate. And Purity actually takes that zero and says, I don't care. Go away.
I've already initialized all the underlying physical storage. And
well, you don't have to because it's Flash. That's the beautiful thing, right? So when you need to write data to the Flash array, all we do is make a metadata table entry on the logical block address of where that data is going to reside, and we write it down to a cell. That's it. That's the wonderful thing about Flash.
And then with the dedupe function in there, there is no possibility that another region will be addressed in any way. Yeah, there's no way to read data that you haven't already written.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what the zeroing is all about. Is having latent data underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we
nice.
don't care. We just throw those away. So as we look at this,
and don't account for them in dedupe.
And we don't account for them in dedupe.
Or at least, sorry, in your data reduction.
In our because let's be honest, guys. I mean, if we can include thin provisioning in our data reduction, and we counted that, I mean, that's like a check you can never go to the bank and cash. I mean, yeah, sure, I got zeros, but well, how does that help me? That really doesn't help me when I move forward. So if I look at these cards here, we talked about the capacity of the array is shown, average data reduction. I also see latency. I can go to a different view, right? Maybe this isn't the view I like. So you can set this up however you want. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to my vBrown bag. I have a few other arrays that I manage, Alistair, but I'm pretending that I'm managing your array as well. Why did that?
Or was that the previous vBrown bag when we did the previous build?
It shouldn't be, because it was just here just a minute ago.
Are there two different vBrown bags though? Because we've had the vBrown bag array that we built in the dry run, and then we've got the vBrown bag array that we built today, and we gave them the same name.
Yeah, and that could be the case. Okay, so let's just pretend like this is vBrown bag here, and we'll figure it out and come back to it and show you guys what this actually looks like later. But the other thing to point out to you, right, is on this Pure One. By the way, this is a mobile app that you guys have access to. So let's just pretend like, hey, you want to see how things are performing. You're sitting performing. You're out to lunch with your boss, and he says, "Hey, how's that Pure thing going?" You can pull up your mobile device, whether that's an Apple or an Android, whatever device that is, and you can show him, "Hey, look how we're doing. Sub-millisecond latency here. We can see the performance." This is where all those things that we talked about before, about when I mentioned the ability to take all the analytics of the data that Pure sends back, that we can now start to do things like predictive analytics and things like that. This is where all this is going to take place, is in this Pure One dashboard. And again, this isn't something that you install on a separate VM or another dedicated server in your environment.
No,
it's
more
not
management
licensing. Yeah, there's nothing. It's in the cloud. It's out there available to you. If you're a customer, you get it. And there's no additional management.
It's a value add for your purchase and subscription that you will, the evergreen maintenance that you'll be paying.
So exactly. So the other great thing that I get really excited about is as we make improvements in this, as we start to roll out that artificial intelligence and machine learning with all this data and this predictive analytics, we don't have to say, guess what? We have to update your Pure One managed interface, right? We just push it out there. And when you guys want to use it, you log into your dashboard, you say, oh, what is this? I can forecast? Oh, let's go ahead and see what I can forecast in here and see what's going on, right? And we can do some trending and some different things within this interface. So we can do the same if we have. That's one thing I want to mention, because we are going to talk about the Purity upgrade. Any improvements that we make in the operating system, and I have had a lot of customers that I was out there. This was really cool for me, right? We had a customer about 1.5 years ago. We made some improvements in the Purity operating system, and our data reduction actually got better.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? It actually got way better. So we did this purity upgrade. This customer's array we were teetering on needing to add capacity. We were like 80% full.
Mhm.
We upgraded the purity operating system. We dropped them from 80% full down to 70% full, and they had a little bit more time to
A
work
little bit
with
more
their
runway to
Yeah.
get the purchasing on board, get the budget cycles right.
exactly to say, hey, we
Nice.
didn't plan for that workload. It kind of just popped up from our
Mhm.
developers. So it's a really great thing for you guys to be able to take advantage of. We want to always continue to improve and get better and better.
Mhm.
And as we do those things, we're not expecting you to write us another check. Take advantage
Just
of
To
everything.
capture that feature expansion.
Exactly.
Nice.
It's really exciting. Okay, so at this point in time, I think I'm going to let you take a look at
Mhm.
your vCenter server. We have already verified the array is super healthy. Our NVRAM is healthy. We should probably take a look really quick about what
I
are
can-
the configuration here. We see
See that we've got
primary and secondary. We see our purity version. I do want to address one thing here. This is really important. So if we go and we look at the array here, if we look at the system health tab, you notice that this, and we talked about this, right, as we were putting in those flash modules, this is a 20 terabyte raw array. And of that 20 terabytes, you notice that the manufacturer of those flash drives takes a little bit off the top. They take a little bit off the top because they're trying to account for cells that may burn out in flash. So when we put those flash drives modules within our array, we're only seeing, why did that zoom in? Oh, there it is. We're only seeing 18.6 terabytes actually show up. And then you're probably going to really call out at me. You're going to say, Stacy, how come I only see 11 terabytes in the GUI? Well, here's the thing. Pure is a very transparent company. And so instead of taking it off the top and saying, hey, you bought 20 terabytes, but we're really shipping you, our 2 terabyte drives are really only 1 terabyte drives. That's all you can really see. We just say, look, we need space within the Pure array to house our metadata tables. We have to keep track of all the metadata. Where's the logical block addresses of all the data that you're going to write to the array? We have some amount of capacity that's accounting for that RAID 3D or the N+2, so that we're keeping enough copies that we can rebuild the data if we have drive failures. We also need to keep additional capacity for, look, all flash arrays have to do garbage collection. Why do we have to do garbage collection? Because so when data gets written to flash, it gets written to a cell. The longer that data sits in that cell, the less of a voltage that cell has. And the less of a voltage that cell has, it's at risk of losing that data.
Yeah.
So we
risk of being
basically,
unreadable.
Yeah, unreadable. So we have to
Refresh it.
periodically refresh the voltage. How do we refresh that voltage? We write to that space again. So we have to have working space for garbage collection, meaning we're going to move the data, we're going to pull it out of some of those cells, and we're going to write it to different cells. And when we write it to different cells, we recharge those cells, and our data has great data integrity, and it's really amazing. So we have, when we have an array that's 20 terabytes, we take a little off the top. Normally it's 58% of the capacity that you purchase is going to be usable in the GUI. And then because we get such amazing, great data reduction, normally on average, we're 2x what our competitors do. And the reason for that is because we don't do fixed block boundaries for our deduplication. We're super granular all the way down to 512 bytes for deduplication. Our compression algorithms are continuing to get better and better. We're continuing to do different things on compression. And so we're just able to get much better deduplication, which means that you can put more on the array than you ever thought possible.
And so you end up being able to store more data than the raw capacity that you believe you purchased.
Exactly.
Even though the UI shows you a lower usable capacity.
Exactly. So if I took this 11 terabytes, on average, all of our customers, and it depends on the workloads, right? But on average, if we took all of our customers that are deployed today, on average, we see 5-to-1 data reduction. So this is really a 55 to 60 terabyte array. Even though I only have 20 terabytes, I have my shelf half populated, and I'm only taking up 3U in the data center. Pretty amazing stuff.
It is really cool. And some of that compression, we've got a video, I think, with Vaughan where we talked about some of the compression, about having the inline compression as the writes come in, as well as having a background process, which is a higher compression, but doesn't get in the way of that I/O latency.
Yeah.
Because it requires more time to handle that greater compression. That's some of the places that you get that benefit.
Exactly, because our number
data
one
reduction.
priority is response time to the applications.
Yeah.
So if somebody's doing a really heavy write workload to the array, we're going to throttle some of that inline or data compression, so that we can service those IOs.
So if they're doing, if you're using it maybe as a backup target or the equivalent kind of I/O where it's large streaming IOs, those are the ones that are going to bypass the initial compression.
Right. Exactly.
But then get cleaned up
after the fact.
when the IOs have actually landed. Nice.
Yep. Exactly.
Nice.
All right. So I'm going to hand it back over to you to check some of your vCenter
Make
stuff.
sure we're migrations are all progressing and virtual machines are coming in. It's continuing to be slow. This virtual machine is taking a while to come in, so the third virtual machine to migrate in is still coming through, and we're still constrained by my NAS being the limiting factor. And that's something to factor in your migration planning as you're coming onto the Pure array, is that the migration will be gated by the performance of your original array. I guess in a larger environment with real workloads, as we're draining the workload off the old array, the actual production workload, then the available performance of that older array is going to increase, and the migrations will go faster as you get further through it. Interesting stuff, migration planning.
So the only other thing that we need to do, because we did reboot some of the controllers, is we do want to verify, because at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and stage the Purity code onto the controller so that we can upgrade from that 495 code. We're going to go ahead and take it all the way to 410.4.
Great. Did we want to do that before or after the capacity expansion?
We could do either. Which would you prefer? Do you want to add the capacity now?
Let's add the capacity,
All
because
right.
we've been changing other bits.
All right,
We've got more
let's do
performance, so let's add more capacity.
All right, Alice, there.
This is where I feed the machine.
It's the other box.
Yes.
All right. I'll hand them to you, and
Alrighty.
you can go ahead and put them in. How's that?
So this is a second data pack. This is another
These are also the 2 terabyte modules.
10 of these 2 terabyte modules going in. Is there any reason to sort of go slowly with this? I know in one of the really old arrays that used a fiber channel arbitrated loop FCAL at the back end, you had to wait 2 minutes between each disk so that the FCAL could rebalance. None of those constraints on these.
None of those constraints. We are now all over PCIe.
So these are direct PCIe connections.
Yep.
And we go bing, 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 bing.
And do we have
Amber
that?
lights on the front as they initialize. Number 9, and finally, number 10 goes in.
Fantastic.
So now we've got a 40 terabyte array almost.
It's still initializing. So if we look at your interface there, let's go ahead and go to the System tab.
So we can see the disks
yellow.
are in, but they've recognized that they're still in the yellow
And
state.
if we stay right there, as soon as they all initialize and go green, we're going to see this raw capacity jump, and our parity may drop below 100% for a short period of time as we're redistributing the bits across the entire array modules.
So that's the rebalance and start to use all of the disks basically as the whole pool. Right.
So I want to take a minute to really point out to everybody that joined us today and that will join later, is that ordinarily when you're adding capacity to any sort of array out there, there's a certain amount of pre-planning that has to take place, and you certainly wouldn't get the redistribution of the capacity that would just automatically take care of itself.
Well, I'd expect to have some sort of RAID setup to be done again on adding capacity, even if it's just saying go make it so.
Right.
But let's not even apply our default settings. It's just stick the additional capacity in the unit.
Exactly.
We didn't tell the unit in advance that it was getting additional capacity. We didn't do any planning.
That's exactly right. So Purity is going to pick up on these changes, and the Purity operating system is going to be what takes care of all those things on our behalf, so that we don't have to. Again, back to the Pure's whole one of our key tenets, if you will, is simplicity. So just eliminating that is something an administrator really has to worry about. If an array were to start to fill, that's one last thing that you don't have to think about.
Yeah. If you're running short on space, then particularly with an array like this with the compression and dedupe in play, the last thing you ever want to do is run out of space. So the easier you can make that process to expand, the better.
Yep.
Any guess at how long we need for these disks to be these modules to be available?
I wouldn't expect it to take too much longer.
Okay.
Oh, it says unrecognized.
Unrecognized
That's a difference.
is the status.
Let's reseat those, and what I am sort of worried about here, full transparency, is that because it thought that those drives existed before, that we have them in a funky state. But let's try to reseat them and see if we can get that to work. If not, we may need a phone support, have support help us out with this a little bit. Let's continue on though, and talk. We can go through some questions. We can also open up remote assist and start staging the new Purity operating system. But let's attempt those things first. All
right. Well, also while we're finding out why these drives are showing as unrecognized, do go and have a look at the quiz, bit.ly Pure Build Day. Question 3 is about VMware environments where dead space can build up, in the places that dead space can build up in a VMware environment. Remember that the US-based entrants who are completing this quiz go in the draw on the 20th of August for a few of these wonderful wireless Bluetooth headsets, fully wireless Bluetooth headsets. So switching out, pulling those disks out and reseating them has given us the same state as unrecognized. So we're going to go phone a friend and ask the support team what it is that we should do to bring them back in. We suspect it's because there's some remaining information about previous config on the M70s and that it's just lived that back up again.
What's happening is that those drives participated in another array. They think they're part of another array configuration, and so they're saying, hey, I can't be added to this array. I belong to somebody else. And so we're gonna try to see what we can do to kick them loose and tell them that you can absolutely be added into the array.
To this array. And this is again something that happens in the lab and would never happen to a real customer.
That's correct. Yep.
So we were just talking about the data efficiency numbers, and Vaughan and I spent a while talking about this earlier in the week, and so we'll just get Jeffrey to queue up that video while we go through the escalate out to support, because we're doing that on a channel that we can't show you easily in the live stream, so we'll just cut to a video and have Vaughan tell us about data efficiency.
Sounds good. See you guys in a bit.
So it's not just the compression algorithms that can reclaim a lot of space for customers. It's also the ability to reclaim that space that's trapped in deleted files using these SCSI unmaps that Vaughan and I talked about. You weren't here for that conversation, so it's you're looking at me slightly.
Actually, no, I'm very familiar
fully
with
understanding
that.
Why is that the transition? Really interesting thing happened when we went into that video. As Stacey had talked about the remote support, that log information is being sent and the support team are watching for that. Well, the support team reached out and said, hey, we're getting lots of logs on this vBrownBag array. And the conversation actually went on through the Slack channel, which they've let me actually bring up the Slack channel on my laptop. And here they're telling the team that there's going to be this vBrownBag live thing to go and watch, and that our own people are going to be starring on it. And so in response, the support team says, hey, there's lots of alerts coming in on this array. Is it a problem? And Cody goes back and says, yeah, please ignore. There's all kinds of failure testing. Sorry to disturb your day. And then Cody says, got a bit of a problem. Can you take a look? And of course, we opened up the remote assist, so they could just dial in and say, "Yeah, I can see there's a problem. There's these drives that aren't recognized. They come from another array."
We thought we were going to have to do some crazy stuff to.
So I
reconfigure them.
stopped Stacey from pulling the chassis of the M70 and the two M50 controllers out of the room, because that way we could have built up another array and initialized those disks.
Yeah,
Because the support team said, "Yeah, we can fix that. Give us a minute."
that's the beauty of peer support. Those guys can do things I have no idea the amazing things that they can do, and this is just another example of things they already know how to fix this problem.
And I love that we got the practical application, the actual organically got the support team reaching out saying, "I'm seeing errors, would you like me to do something about it?" And we hadn't planned this stage, that even thought that it was something that would happen. And here it is.
Actually, there is a way when you're doing upgrades like this, there is a way to tell support, "Hey, this is a planned maintenance window." But we didn't do any of that because this is part of the experience
Because
that
it's
we
V Brown
want you
Bag.
guys to see. Truthfully, I probably should have put some notifications in there, but it turned out to be an amazing thing. So
Yeah, so I believe they're still working in there
to try and fix those
to try and fix
unrecognized
those.
drives that they think they belong to a different array.
Yeah, so we're pretty sure these drives didn't come from Zurich.
They probably, who knows where they came from.
Who knows where they came from? But
Some other
I think
event.
the first data pack that we got was clean. It was because when we first did the dry run setup, it didn't say these are foreign disks that have come from somewhere. They'd been cleaned up. But the second data pack was not.
Right. The beauty of repurposing for various different events.
For various different lab environments.
Yeah.
Okay. What else have we got we can do? We've still got migrations in progress. That master virtual machine is taking a fair while. It's taking a while to come off my slow NAS.
So the other thing that we can do is the Purity operating system upgrade. Although I would prefer to let
support finish, because we're
finish.
going to have to restart the machines they're connected into for that, aren't we?
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's just give them a little bit more time and see what they're able to get resolved. And once the array goes back to being healthy, then we can proceed with doing the Purity operating system upgrade. So you can see not only from a hardware perspective that we can do major changes, but also from a software perspective, and that the whole time we don't take any impact or make any impact on the application that happened to be running.
So I think, Jeffrey, can we play the other Kodi video then, just to give the support team a little more time to deal with this rather unusual situation? Oh, we don't need to. It's clean.
Oh God!
It's clean. just as we were talking, support finished off, and
Wow.
and the SSDs are all healthy and green lights are everywhere. So Kodi, we'll come back to Kodi's video. We won't miss out on him, and we'll have the Kodi in person shortly as well.
So I'm just wrapping up, finishing staging the code. It did complete transfer, so I'm just waiting for the command to complete, and then we'll go ahead and run the Purity upgrade.
So when you're talking about the code in here, this is the install bundle for the Purity operating system. Does this also include the upgrades to the Linux operating system underneath?
No, this is
Right.
just the Purity
Just the Purity
operating system on top.
Right.
Yeah, the Ubuntu operating system that's used for the bare metal, if you will, on the servers. That's just a very basic stripped down version of Ubuntu that we never really touch, to my knowledge. I could be wrong there, but to my knowledge, we don't really ever touch that.
Sure.
We do the Purity operating system updates, and that's really where we. There are firmware upgrades that we do on the drives themselves. If we need to apply new firmware, there's some new enhancements from a drive perspective and other various firmware upgrades that we will do on other pieces of the hardware.
Right.
But the actual underlying bare metal Ubuntu operating system, I'm not aware of any changes that we make to that.
Okay. And then you're staging the update. Obviously, you're not using my laptop. You're not connected to the same network here. You're using the same remote assistance functionality as the GSS team, the support team, have been using.
That's exactly right. I mean, what I'm doing right now is typically wouldn't even be done by myself, right? It would be support, either you saying, hey, there's some new features in the newer version of code that we want to take advantage of, or maybe it's even support saying, hey, we want to get all of our customers to a newer version of code because we found that it has bug fixes in it proactively. So when they do that, they'll coordinate with you a time to do that upgrade, and they will request that you open up that remote assist connection. They'll stage the code, and they'll perform the upgrades for you. So generally speaking, it's not even the SE who does those upgrades, it's support. So
And it's not even an on-site visit; it's entirely done remote.
it's all done remote. There's a lot of there's phone calls in between saying
Of course,
we're going to
you've
start.
got to coordinate.
The controller's been rebooted.
Mhm.
You know, generally there's a pause in between verifying that the hosts are all good, and before we proceed to the next one. But all done by support remotely. Right.
And in your experience with customers, how does that fit into the customer's change management processes?
A lot of customers, because they, you know, initially customers are very apprehensive and they really need to see it in their own environment before they can believe that this really just isn't impactful. And so initially we'll schedule the first couple of security upgrades. And then after that, generally what they do is they go to their change control board and they say, can we get an exception? We know
Can
this
we
doesn't
Just
impact.
make this a standard operating procedure of a
Standard
notification.
operating procedure. We can do it whenever we want to, whatever the case is, but they get an exception for that change control process, and that allows us to do the upgrades. And or in some cases, they just coordinate it and they tell
So
support,
continue to do.
hey, we need to do it on Saturday night at 10 p.m., whatever the case is.
Yeah, that's what Mike Curtis just said in the chat. He said we tried to kill a Pure, which was a brand new unit loan for test with an install engineer. We couldn't, but after 10 minutes, our NOC got a call from a lovely lady warning us of the problem.
So again, proactive contact from support because of that remote monitoring.
Yep.
Nice.
And they bought the test unit.
And they bought it, so they didn't have to ship it back before and make people cry as they gave it up.
Exactly.
So are we ready to do the upgrade?
We are ready to do the upgrade. The first thing that we do, and so here, one of the things that support has done, because they spend a lot of time and knowledge working with customers, is they've created some scripting that does some checks and balances and end user prevention, right? So we all know that most events that happen aren't because actually of the hardware or the software, but they can be end user related or somebody fat fingered something. And so we've tried to prevent that and remediate that by creating scripts that do all those checks on our behalf and lets us know if they see a problem. So I'm going to run those checks at this point in time.
Stacey, can we do the same thing? Well, it'd be a pain to switch to an SSH on my screen so people could see the commands you're running.
We could certainly try it, or if you want to hold that there.
Well, I'd better hold this because you're going to need to type.
Okay. So right up here, you saw, if I scroll back here, I'm connected to our array support array, if you will. And up here, you'll notice this command here. I've done a stage controller upgrade. I'm staging it to the primary controller of the vBrown bag array. And I'm telling it my ending version of Purity I want it to be on is 4.10.4. And it goes through and it does the copying and staging of the code into a directory local to the array itself. So this is this is what it was doing earlier, was copying it over. And then it copies not only on the primary controller, but it also copies to the secondary controller. And now at this point in time, when that script completes, you notice that it tells me go ahead and log into the array. And then go ahead and run the run check script, which is what I'm going to run right now. So I go ahead and I do these run check scripts. And while that's doing, I'm going to go ahead and copy this into my buffer for later.
I'm just thinking how video production is such an interesting thing that I'm sitting here using Jeff's iPhone as the camera to capture your screen because we didn't set you up to be captured earlier.
Well, it's okay. This is all going to work out. It's great.
Yeah, and this will be, as you say, the support team potentially in the middle of the night. Whereabouts is the support team located? Are they located all around close to us here in Mountain View?
We do have. So what's interesting about support? So let's see. Let's revisit that in just a second here. What does it say? It says automatic boot time firmware updated. Recommend please contact Pure Installations for further guidance. It looks like, are our hosts actually writing any more data?
So there is definitely data being written. So bear in mind that we only have 2 of the 4 iSCSI connections actually cabled.
Okay, so it's
So it'll probably be complaining about the other 2.
about that. This is what it's actually saying. We need to upgrade firmware somewhere along in the system. So at this point in time, I'm going to go back to that Slack channel. I'm going to ask my good buddy in this VMware Slack. I'm going to say, hey, can you guys update the firmware?
So in that Slack communication, we got the feedback that that Alex had done the upgrade and was closing his case in the support system relating to the errors that he saw on our array. Absolutely awesome. So now Stacey's asking the support team.
I'm asking them to just go ahead and go through and look at the firmware and take it up to the appropriate version. This is where, you know, as an SE, I don't work in support as much as they do. I don't do a lot of the firmware stuff as much as they do. So I'd like them to give me that second set of eyes. They're the experts on this. And that way, Alistair and I can have some other conversations. And maybe what we start with is that question that you asked about, where does support live? So support resides, our biggest support entity is in Salt Lake City. We do have support in other areas. I can't specifically remember. They're overseas, essentially.
Overseas, so follow the sun.
We don't follow the sun, actually. Yes. We don't do that follow the sun methodology. Salt Lake is really our primary support center. One of the things that you guys should know is that typically people who do support have level 1, level 2, level 3 support engineers. We try not to start with any lower level support engineers and go right into what would be a level 2 or level 3 support person. They can solve a bulk of the problems unless they run into something they've never seen or need a little bit of help. And in those cases, they typically escalate directly to Pier's engineering team, who then helps. And another cool thing, I always thought this was an amazing thing about Pier, is that the engineering team that's responsible for Purity, they have to do, I'm going to call it a tour of duty with support. So they sit with support for a week or 2 weeks of time, so they can see what issues are coming up with support. And then when they go back to continue doing some of the development and the improvements in the operating system, they can take into consideration all the things that they saw really coming up as issues or challenges that the support team had to deal with. So nice. I think that's a pretty amazing thing that we happen to do. The primary reason for having our Salt Lake City support center is there's a lot of people who speak many different languages who happen to live in Salt Lake City. And then we do have a few others. I know we have one in Ireland and a few other locations. But it's not a follow the sun model. Salt Lake does a lot of it. And our escalations all go back to engineering, which is predominantly in Mountain View, California. So.
Yeah, and in fact, there's an engineering team sitting outside the meeting room here. And as I was standing in a hallway talking to one of the guys explaining what we were doing, he was very excited to see that we were doing this live stream of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So the new Purity OS has been staged to the array. So the array is now ready. And we had some confirmation from the support team that there were some tunable settings that have been set that were blocking the upgrade. And they've now cleared those. So we've continued to have great support at the back end from the support team. And now you've seen Cody's face, you've heard his voice. And now we're going to have him more live, and he's going to take over and be our implementation engineer from here.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. Live
this time. Excellent. We'll just make sure we're going to hear you properly. So Jeff's just checking out why your mic's not quite right.
Okay.
And get your levels up.
Sounds good. I don't have anything important to say anyway, so.
So you've been briefed by the field engineer on what to do next.
Yep.
But of course, these firmware upgrades, as we discussed, are something that's normally done by the support team in cooperation with or scheduled with the customer. But you're going to do this upgrade for us now. So just to remind everybody, our environment currently Gee, we had a nice break while you were talking. Our environment is currently there we go, array configuration. So we're on 4.9.5, which is not the most current version of Purity, and we really do want to be on the current version. So what's the process for the upgrade actually take? What's going to happen as we run this upgrade?
Well, there's a couple things, right? I mean, there's a lot of checks that we'll do, support will do. You can run some yourself, of course. We want to make sure that your hosts, are accessing both controllers, right? And there's I/O through that. Now we went through some of that before. And then, of course, a bunch of checks. Are there any firmware upgrades going on? And that's all done in a script, essentially, that we kick off when we're about to do an upgrade. Now, the actual upgrade process itself is, we go to one of the controllers, install the new code, and then reboot it. And it's going to boot into like the partition that the new code is stored, right? And there's the old partition where the old code is stored. And then once that's back up, we'll then go to the other controller, upgrade the code, reboot it. And the other one controller will take over as the primary while this one's rebooting, and then it'll come back up and become secondary.
So the first one that's upgraded is the current secondary that is not doing all of the metadata writes and those pieces.
Right. But I mean, you can technically do either one. It doesn't really matter.
It's just that this is going to minimize the number of switches between controllers.
Exactly.
All right. Well, you were going to do this on the physical console, weren't you?
Yep.
So, all right. Let's get in and do that.
Alrighty. Right, so
Jeffrey's just going to get the camera across on us. All right, so the first step here is, we're logged into the primary controller. We've run the PureDB list mode that shows us, yes, we're in the primary. And so we'll kick off this script. And so what this script is going to do is it's going to go to the other controller, right? It's going to upgrade the code. Here, SSH to connect to the other controller.
Correct. So we've got to enter in the final version, 4.10.4.
4.5.10 is the...
That's the example.
That's the example, right? Not the target. So I couldn't just blindly type that
exactly,
in and
exactly,
upgrade.
yeah.
So there's a whole heap of stuff in here which is idiot-proofing. And I've just shown myself to be the idiot again.
Yeah, it's always important to read. So this is going to go in the other one, upgrade that code, reboot it, and wait for it to come back up. And once it comes back up, we'll just say, hey, do you want to we'll upgrade the code on this guy. It's like, hey, do you want to reboot? We'll say, yep. And then it'll kick us out because it's going to reboot. And then we'll go into the other one to run the same script. Say, all right, let's wait for the other one to come up, and then I'll do some final checks and say, we're good to go. Right. So this is the process it's running through now. Zed is doing a ton of checks to make sure things are healthy and upgrading that code before it's finished.
Right,
again.
and little delay, a 3-minute uptime delay to make sure everything's stabilized out.
Yep, absolutely. So there's a lot of protections built into this process.
Yeah, and if this is, particularly since this has been done unattended and remote, if this fails, then it's going to be a relatively long time to get somebody there to fix it.
Exactly.
So you have to have all of those checks.
Because honestly, most of the problems we run into are environmental, right? This is why there's a command that we offer called pure host monitor -- balance. And that basically says that, yes, the I/O is balanced across the two different controllers and so forth.
There we go. Confirm that you want to go ahead and set up this version.
Okay. Looks good. All right, unpacking Purity install. So it's going to install Purity. Purity itself takes a minute or so to install, and the reboot's going to take a couple more minutes for it to come back.
Yeah, and we'll see the standard delay for that.
Exactly. The reboot, it's a physical kind of running operating. So that's why we have a lot of these checks to make sure the environment is safe, right? Because as I said, those are most of the problems we run into.
And of course, that's why we had the failure to run the update earlier when Stacey was running it, because we have two disconnected iSCSI network adapters, which you wouldn't allow in a production environment.
Correct. Yeah. If you have one host just connected to one controller, if you reboot it, right, you don't want to do that, right? So it's important to make sure there's redundant connectivity, and that's one of the many checks that we do when upgrading Purity.
Now, continuing to remind ourselves of what else is going on, the copy of those 9 virtual machines that I started earlier that's been streaming off my slow NAS, that's continued. We've got, I think, about half of the VMs and all of the really big ones have been copied across, and so the I/O is carrying on. My storage vMotions have been running continuously through this whole process.
Sorry to interrupt. We got to commit. Let's do it.
Yeah. Now, in the unlikely event that I needed to roll back, can support just switch that boot flag and say boot from the prior version?
Correct. That's why we don't like just nuke the other partition. It's there just in case. They'll say, oh, wait,
Right.
actually, you know what? We're not ready to move to that. Let's stop it. Let's go to that other partition.
Or in the unlikely event that you move to it and find a problem, you can roll back again.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we keep that double partition is to make sure there's some options. At least we can also look at, right, hey, was there something different or configured differently in this original partition that's affecting something else?
Right, so I
we
could
do some
look and see if
comparison.
the config files were different and maybe one of the upgrades had made a change to config files and that was toxic.
Correct, exactly. So
Nice.
that gives us some auditing essentially of what's going on by
Right.
not nuking that partition. So is this rebooting? It's going to wait up to a couple minutes here to make sure that it comes back, and then we'll continue on the process.
And that's just the Purity OS stop and start, isn't it? It's the Purity reboot, not the OS reboot.
It's actually rebooting.
It's going to do a full OS reboot, so we're going to have to wait for the post and all of those pieces.
Exactly,
as well.
right, for the post and memory and all that type of stuff to do that full reboot and come back online. Absolutely. So, yeah, it's just more than just a Purity restart because we actually want to reboot it into that new partition.
Oh, of course.
That's what's happening.
Of course.
So,
Now, we've got a couple of videos of you working with the automation tools, and we've seen those playing out. What sort of things are you seeing with customers using those? What interesting things have you seen going on in that sort of automation around the pure storage environment and the other environments?
Yeah. So, I mean, we did a couple demos, right? We did VRO, VRA, and then, of course, virtual volumes. And the initial conversations I had with customers maybe about 2 years ago is when a lot of automation questions started coming up, right? Their environments are getting larger. They need to be more agile. What do I do? And usually the question that came up is what I want to automate is snapshots, right? I have DBAs, I have application owners, I have VMware administrators. They want to be able to restore. They want to be able to provision their own copies of databases, leveraging the snapshotting of the array, right? Because if you do a VM copy of 2 terabyte database, it's still going to take some time.
2 terabytes of data to move.
Exactly, right? Now you can offload it with like Xcopy, but it's still, a process, right? With a snapshot, it's instant. So they want to be able to leverage that and give some self-service down to the users, right? And so there's 2 questions. How do I automate it? And how do I then provide self-service?
Yeah.
Right. And so the orchestration, vRealize Orchestrator was one of the first things we started kind of pushing out there and working on. And that was, this is one of the ways you can orchestrate, right?
Yeah. And we're going to implement that shortly and have a look at that.
Exactly. And then this vRealize automation is really more about that self-service and so forth. But it's really around the initial request around those snapshots. But, I was just talking to a customer the other day, and they're looking at just kind of automating, just kind of deploying out flash arrays, right? I got a flash array empty with an IP. I want to copy the configuration. I want to provision it out, right? And using those types of tools is a great way to
push all of the IP configs and those things in.
Exactly, additional hosts and then maybe iSCSI ports or whatever you happen to be using, and kind of push that out as simply a template, right?
But actually at provisioning time of new arrays rather than operational post.
Exactly. So they're kind of growing with it, but it really initially started around snapshots.
That then suggests these clients are running dozens of flash arrays rather than 2 or 3.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, not just 1 or 2, a bunch, right? And that's where that really that comes into focus. And of course, virtual volumes really makes a lot of this even easier, right? Because you don't, with VMFS, you got that resignaturing. With vVols, it's just single volume, so it makes that automation even easier, right? Because there's less VMware steps involved.
So the ability to push the VM across doesn't
exactly. And so that makes that snapshot use case, much friendlier, right?
Yes.
When it comes to VMware environments with the virtual volume. So as I said in the video, I'm very excited to kind of see what additional orchestration automation customers build on top of all of this. So looks like the arrays come back. We're doing some boot time firmware updates, and it's waiting for that to complete. And we'll move on when that's done. Shouldn't take too long.
So there's firmware updates. Are they packaged as part of the new Purity OS, or are they separately pulled down?
Correct. It's part of the kind of the update package, right? I mean, the package that we push down is a couple different files and scripts and things like that. I mean, really, Purity is just one
component.
That has everything kind of in it, right? But there's some other files and things for the checks. So it includes this if it's needed during some kind of an upgrade, if we have improvements to the performance of the firmware or whatever we're doing, right?
Something that addresses stability, performance.
Exactly. So that's all kind of packaged into it. So they may or may not happen depending on what Purity version you're going to and what changes have occurred, right? So these aren't always going to occur during these updates, but certainly check for it to make sure things come up healthy.
And depending upon whether it's it might be the Ethernet controller firmware, it might be firmware pushed down onto the NVRAM or something like that. We may see these again when this controller reboots, or we may not.
Exactly. So there's a variety of different things that could occur when we're doing these upgrades, right? And of course, these are all listed in the the release notes of the updates. What's going to actually happen, right? We want to make sure it's known between us and the customer what we're actually going to be changing on your hardware, because this is your storage array, right? We're just updating it to make it either better, faster, new features, whatever. So.
One of the things we haven't talked about is the ability to add additional disk shelves on these things, because we know that can happen, because when we got these M70, it expected another 2 shelves of disks.
Exactly.
What do they look and feel like? What are they, other than just give me more capacity, is there anything else that's involved in the decision around those disk shelves?
Yeah, I mean, they're basically SAS connected with additional shelves, about the same amount of drives, a few more, right, that we can just connect in the back, and we add 1, 2, 3 shelves, adding additional capacity. And it's the same process, right? Is plug in the SAS cables, connect the...
And that plug in the SAS cables is a hot while the array is running?
While the array is running, absolutely, right? Throw in those drives, and Purity's like, oh, I see some new storage, let's start configuring it and adding it to my capacity.
Yeah.
Right? It's just plug and play is really the whole goal behind it, because you don't want to take an outage just because you need to add
some more capacity.
10 more terabytes.
You need more capacity because you've got workloads that are consuming all of your current capacity.
Exactly. All right, so our other array now is going down. It's rebooting to update itself. And so we'll probably be kicked out of this pretty soon. And then we'll switch over to the other controller to wait for it to come back up.
So we were running this originally on CT0 or CT1?
CT, originally running this on, I believe, CT0.
So this is the console on CT0, and it's PRSSH.
Yep.
So this it's done the boot time firmware upgrades, and it's now doing a reboot to come up with those firmwares in place.
Correct. That'll move through, and then we'll be on Purity 4.10. And 4.10 came out a couple months ago, I think, May or something like that. So it's relatively new code.
Any interesting headline new features?
I mean, one of the cool things is a big write performance improvement.
Okay.
Right. We've done some work inside of Purity to improve our sustained write performance. Right. This is one of kind of the neat things about it is that like ever so often you're going to get software updates that improves performance, right, on the hardware that you already have, right? Because ever often we'll find, maybe we have a little bottleneck here we could fix, and here, right, we can fix in the software. That's
one of the things that differentiates all flash arrays is that usually you're trying to tune the rest of the stack to cope with the performance that you can, or to not hobble the performance you can get out of the underlying flash.
Exactly, right? You're not relying on necessarily how many spindles or something like that you have, right? There's a different kind of mechanism. So there allows a lot of flexibility and room for improvement when it comes to performance by itself. Yeah. And so that was a core part of that release. Of course, the other part of the 4.10 was support for our FlashArray//X NVMe platform as well. So that was another kind of core portion of that
That's
release.
The first place where things like new disks are required as you're going through these upgrades. Thinking back, there was the old 300 and 500 series, the previous generation hardware.
Yep, 300 and 400 series.
300 and 400. If I had those older arrays, what was the migration process like to move on to the M series?
So for the M series is slightly different than what we've done here, right? The M series is just kind of pull out, pull in, right? So with the 400 series, right, they were two
discrete controller nodes.
Controllers that we'd have to, essentially what you do is we had an additional connector where you could connect kind of the FlashArray M chassis into it, and then you'd plug it into one of the backs, and then do a failover to one of the M's, kind of similar software-wise what we've done here. Yeah. And then we pull out that controller, turn it off, unplug it or whatever, and then we do a failover to the other one from the one inside of the FlashArray M to the other ones in there, removing the old one, right? So there was some cabling involved.
Right, because it was a different physical form factor. You couldn't just hardware swap the way we have here. Yeah, but it was, again, no stop of the I/O, no downtime.
Yeah, like a completely different hardware infrastructure, essentially moving from here to there, between the 400 to the M, and then from the M inside the M. Of course, this is one of the reasons we designed the M like it is, because it's even easier, right, to do that kind of upgrade within the chassis with these modular type. Maybe the M's modular. Maybe that's what it stands for. I don't even know, but that's one of the reasons we've done it, to make it a lot simpler, right? All right, running some checks here.
And we couldn't lay our hands on an X to do the upgrade, the update in here, and maybe later some other time we'll do that. go from one of the ends.
Pure Build
across to an
Day
X.
V2 on bag.
Yeah.
Supercharged.
And of course, now we're going to wait for that 3 minutes of uptime on the upgraded controller before we do anything else to just make sure that everything has come up and that all of our hosts can see the additional powers as active again.
Absolutely. As I said, a lot of this is just waiting and checking. Really, the upgrade itself is a shorter part of the process. Making sure things are done right. It's always very important.
One other thing is, I know usually I see you at conferences. Where are you going to be out and about at conferences in the next few months?
Well, shockingly, VMworld, right? So VMworld US, I have a couple sessions, and then also VMworld Barcelona. I'll be there as well. That'll be my main focus. And then also kind of throughout, I do a lot of peer user groups.
Right.
Just kind of spread in October, and I think the middle of the US, I'm doing a few of them. I think Louisiana and whatnot. But my main focus for the next month and a half is, of course, VMworld US and Barcelona. So I'm pretty excited about it. I've done a lot of fun sessions with partners and so forth, VVols and best practices, and just what's new in vSphere storage with Cormac Hogan at VMware. So it should be a lot of fun.
Always
looking
nice
forward to it.
To spend some time with Cormac as well.
Yeah. It's always, every time I talk to the guy, I learn something.
You're learning a lot. Yeah.
Should be good. I got to impress him. It's the first time I'm presenting with him. So.
And you've got a long session with him because that affected our ability to schedule in for a Tech Talk as well, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Because of course, Pure Storage is also a sponsor of the vBrownBag Tech Talks at VMworld, so keep an eye out for those coming up next month as well. Here we go. Our 3 minutes must be coming close to
our 3 minutes. Yep.
At the end, and then we'll have Controller 0 will do its update at that point. Okay, so the pre-upgrade checks have been running on CT0, our second to last line in here. What else can we talk about in this time in between? How's your dancing skills?
My dancing skills are awesome. I don't want to show them just because you will all run in fear of how grand and amazing it actually is. But I don't know. Well, maybe a little bit later after the VRO portion of this section, I can show you my dancing skills. But
and my wife and family know not that I should not dance at all for fear of damaging the stack of equipment that we have here.
That's generally what I've been told as well. I'm not. We have some really good dancers, I'll have to say, in our product management team, but they know who they are. But they are certainly amazing. But.
So now we're running the checks. Now we've had enough stability on the upgraded CT1.
Yep. We can take a look at the.
Let's take a quick look at the UI.
What it looks like on the UI. Yeah, sounds good.
So now we can see that split in the Purity versions.
Yep.
CT1 is at 4.10.4 and 4.9.5 on the other. And there we go. I'm going to commit to upgrading CT0
All right.
for us. Yeah, go. 4.10.4. What could possibly go wrong?
Do not interrupt.
So now it's clearing the partition that was on the pre 4.9.5, whatever, 4.8.
We did it, yep, exactly. So clear it out, and it'll put the 4.10 code on.
Yeah.
So this is the unpackage process and making sure all the files are there and creating the partition, and then we'll go through a similar check that we went through before.
Yeah.
From the other controller.
And we'll see the update. Yeah, we'll see the reboot occur here.
Exactly. It'll take care and reboot itself.
So as we run into the afternoon and the light shifts.
Light shifts, yeah.
Anything else coming in from the stream? Any questions from the audience?
Just showed up. So what's the earliest version of ESXi and vSphere to have Pure built in?
The oldest version?
Earliest version.
Earliest version. So the question from the field was about earliest versions to have Pure built in. So there's no sort of built into Pure, but what's the earliest versions of vSphere and ESXi that are supported with the Pure platform?
Well, I mean, technically, FlashArray M we support back to 5.0, and the older models 4.1 and so forth. But VMware ended support life of 5.0 and 5.1 last August, I think. Now they're just at technical guidance. So we do still support them, but I highly encourage at least moving to vSphere 5.5 if you're not running one of those platforms, especially if you're running ESX 4.1. I did get a question about 4.1 3 months ago. If we supported it and we wanted to run it, I'm like, yeah, definitely move to at least 5.5, right, if you're not on one of those platforms right now.
Fundamentally, the restriction is actually what VMware is prepared to support more than what Pure is prepared to support.
It really is. I mean, most from like a SCSI perspective and the storage support not a lot changes. One of the reasons I definitely encourage getting off of ESX 4.1 into getting at least a 5 is for reasons around like VAAI, right? Because in 5.0 they officially made the VAAI primitives T10 supported standards, right? Not necessarily having
a third-party plugin to
exactly for some of them, and so that's the benefits from that, and having that incorporated into your VMware environment is particularly important, especially for things like Flash, right? So one of the most important VAI features, in my opinion, right, when it comes to at least something to FlashArray, is atomic test and set, right, or hardware-assisted locking, right? Because that's really what allows you to scale up your data stores, have a lot of VMs.
Have lots of VMs on a single data store without experiencing a distributed locking performance problem.
Exactly, right? Because if you're having SCSI reservations every time you boot up a VM, right, you're going to hit performance problems that the Flash is going to help you with, right? So having that atomic test and set, that granularity of locking really allows you to have big data stores if you want to, have lots of VMs on them, right? Otherwise, you're really kind of holding yourself back, right? Because that's the nice thing about the FlashArray is we don't have a per device QDEP limit.
QDEP, yeah, exactly. I was coming back to that one. It's not that you have 2,000 IOs outstanding against the LUN and you're suddenly hitting a really nasty performance cliff. And that's often why we restrict the number of VMs per data store and consequently the size of the data store.
Yeah.
But here we don't. We have a global capacity for IO access rather than a per LUN.
Exactly. I mean, when customers ask me how big should I make my volumes, I'm like, whatever. Right? It's entirely up to you.
Yeah. How much data do you want to lose because one of your guys does something stupid?
Yep. Exactly. It's really not about performance. It's about procedural.
It's about blast radius.
Exactly. Blast radius, even replication, right? Do I want to fail my VMs? Do I not care, right? Looks like we booted into 4.10.
Back here in 4.10. You want to log in on this console and recall that script for the final text?
Yeah. Let's actually move on to the other one here.
You want to go to CP1?
Yeah, let's go to the primary.
So Cody's not out in the field doing this with customers. He's out even less often. Maybe you just switch right across to the side. Even less often than Stacey is doing this, because of course normally support does. So Stacey left good instructions for Cody to complete it out.
Oops, so we typed the password right.
You haven't built the muscle memory that Stacey has.
No. Oops, didn't do it right.
Now you got to type the password.
Yeah.
So right now, I think the
there we go.
Yeah.
Now we're at primary. All right, so it's the other one's still updating, waiting for it to come up.
Yeah, and in the user interface, CT1 is up in primary, and in that admin portal, it's still showing CT0 is offline and updating. So that status is visible to customers when the support team are doing this.
So now we're waiting for the other one to finish all its checks, firmware updates, and so forth.
Right.
So it's the same script we ran before, but just on the other controller, right? Waiting for things to come back up.
So it is an idempotent script. You run it wherever in the environment, and it will bring you to the endpoint.
Exactly. Of course, the support team can switch over to controllers a lot faster than I can. It's not to change the KVM.
Yeah.
Those are the final parts here. Just waiting for Purity to load on the other controller, and we should be just ready to go. Move on to VRO.
VRO and check to see how my migrations of virtual machines are going. And my 9 virtual machines have moved across, so I'm now cloning a template across, and I'm going to deploy a bunch of virtual machines from the template.
Oh, great.
Because, of course, once the template's across, the deploy VM from template's going to be nice and fast.
Xcopy.
My 16 VMs deployed from template should be done in a minute.
Yeah.
Doing the same on the old NAS was taking 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, moving from an old NAS to that, there's gonna be a bottleneck of the NAS, and then with Xcopy inside the array, much faster. But still, it was kind of interesting when I was doing some testing with vVol recently. I did an Xcopy test, right? Copying 100, 500 gig VMs with Xcopy. Right?
Yeah.
And that took 22 minutes, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I did it with vVols, it was 93 seconds, right?
wow.
Because with Xcopy, VMware still has to send a couple thousand Xcopy SCSI
Because it
commands.
only says, it pulls something like 2 meg at a time in the Xcopy transactions.
Exactly. Largest it can do is 16 megs at once. And that's actually bottleneck because it actually sends write sames before the Xcopies, which are 1 meg, right? So there's some bottleneck around that. So it offloads it, makes it faster, but it's not instant, right? Because there's still all those commands, right? vVols, one command, one command, right?
And of course, on a deduped array, it's just metadata change.
Exactly.
Metadata
So
change.
metadata copy, right? Take those pointers and put them wherever, right?
Yeah.
And so Xcopy into vVols, and then once you're in vVols,
Away you go.
vol copy,
Yeah.
right? So there's some cool benefits, right? I mean, I could talk all day about the benefits of virtual volume. So try it at your home today, or
All
in
right.
a couple months.
Let's take a look at another of the questions in that quiz. We're up to question number 4 to go and visit the. Oh,
Well, that's a bit on the nose.
there's a surprise. You want to switch that one in because we were laughing at it ahead. So why is?
I honestly have no
I-
idea how that could possibly be.
Yeah, how could you possibly answer that?
If you don't get that one right, you haven't been listening.
And I'm fairly sure these are all multi-choice as well. I think Ray set us up. Thanks, Ray, for setting that quiz up as well and chasing around everybody to get some questions and answers.
Lob that one right over the plate. All right, so we're at the reboot stage here, so it's waiting for that 600 seconds to have it come back
So
up.
that's the second reboot of the other controller because there were first boot firmware upgrades.
Exactly.
We got a question over here. The original question was the earliest version that has the pure SATP round robin rule built in, so we don't have to run Cody's excellent script.
So that's a wonderful question. Not just because I'm flat. No. So in the latest release of 6.0, actually, I think there was another 6.0 patch just like a week ago or a couple days ago. The one that came out at the end of June, 6.0, I think like patch 5 or something like that. That includes our multipathing rule. So by default,
So can we step back and set up, because I don't think all of the audience knows what an SATP claim rule is. Oh,
that's a very good point. So let me backtrack here. I'm no Stacy. I'm sorry. So in ESX, since ESX 5.0, VMware introduced the ability to make very specific multipathing rules. Right before, you could say, anything that's anything from this array type will be round robin or something like that. In 5.0, they said, all right, this vendor, this model, right, you can configure it with round robin. You can configure it with a different I/O operations limit, which basically dictates how often ESX switches.
These switch routes.
Exactly,
Switch
logical
paths.
paths, right? And for a variety of reasons, we recommend changing from the default, which ESX claims us as, which is most recently used. So they use the first path until it goes away.
Until it goes away, yeah.
And
that's a purely availability, not a performance load distribution. I call it load distribution because it's not balancing.
Exactly. It's not balancing. And so we tell them to move it to round robin because it does help with a couple things, right? And it's not, using both controllers and like that will help you with performance, queuing, and things like that. But it's not intelligent, right? It just comes out the path, right? Like you said. But we do also recommend tweaking the round robin implementation to dictate that it switches paths every single I/O instead of every 1,000 I/Os. And that is a recommendation we do not make for performance. Historically, that's been the argument. Change it to IOPS equals 1 because you'll get better performance.
Well, you will for one VM on one host.
One VM, one host sometimes. A lot of the tests that were run would show that, and like, okay, and there's some situations at scale, it might help you a couple percentages. But really the main reason we recommend this is path failover time.
Right.
ESX will fail over paths much more quickly if there's a physical failure in the environment, right? A switch or a port or something like that, when that value is set low, right? And another like kind of concern about it was, well, is it going to tax my CPUs more? Very little. Most ESX environments are bound by
memory.
Memory, exactly, not CPU, right? So generally, that small sub-percentage hit, not a big
It's
deal,
not a material.
right? It's worth
Yeah.
that path failure resiliency of performance.
Right.
So
Returning to the original question.
the original question, don't ask me about multipathing. I'll go on. It's too late. Yeah. So when is it going to be default? So as I said, in the patch that came out in 6.0 in the end of June, and the number escapes me, but 6.0 patch something, end of June incorporates our multipathing rule. So round robin, IOPS equals 1.
Right.
In 6.5 update 1, which I'm not allowed to say release dates on VMware, but let's say very soon, that will be in the 6.5 code path as well. So you no longer have to worry about that. And really, at this point, that best practice script I have, you can pretty much throw it away.
On the other hand, there'll be a lot of customers who won't be able to deploy out that update for a while.
Yes.
So do you want to just tell us about that script for a moment?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So what this script is, it's a PowerShell script, PowerCLI script, right, that goes to your VMware cluster or vCenters, whatever you point it at. It'll iterate through the host, and it creates that SATP rule, that storage array type plugin rule, to say, all right, all flash array devices, they should be claimed as round robin, and IO operations limit is 1.
Right.
And then they also will go and iterate through any existing devices and make from the flash array, we'll look at our OUI and change them. Because if you set a rule, new devices that are existing before that rule will not inherit it until you reboot. Right? So you can online change it, but you have to individually go to it.
So line by line. Right.
Now there is one other thing that I do change in that script that I've kind of retired, and I'm probably be pulling out, is changing the max hardware transfer size of Xcopy. The default's 4 megs. You can change it up to 16. And we originally recommended changing it because it maybe speed up Xcopy sessions. But honestly, the difference can barely be calculated, right? Even at scale, I've seen maybe like a 0.1% difference. It's because it goes down to that write same bottleneck before the Xcopies come in there, where you don't really see much of a difference above 4 megs. So it does also set that on the host, but I'm pulling that out. I already changed our best practice guide to say don't really worry about it anymore.
So it's not enough of a change from default to be worth having a change from default.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of my rule of thumb in general is if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And simplify, right? Because every time you open a support case, if you change something from default by VMware, they're going to say, hey, why'd you change this? Maybe this is the problem. All right, change it back and let's try it again, right? So generally, the simpler, the better is my feeling around it.
What have we got now? So now that both controllers are running the up-to-date version of Purity, the NVRAM can be updated to match.
Exactly, making sure that those are configured properly and
don't remember the old array that they were plugged in. No, we've fixed that one.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of we have a PowerShell SDK for the flash array. So if you want to manage the flash array with PowerShell, we do have that out there. We update it quite frequently. My coworker Bart's PowerShell guru, right?
Yeah.
He does a lot of blogging about what you can do with that PowerShell SDK, and I use it in a lot of my PowerCLI scripts as well to manage the flash array.
The update is complete.
All right. Let's check it out in the GUI.
Let's have a look.
All right.
Well, what do you know?
Beautiful.
2 controllers running 4.10.4.
You're a Purity expert now.
Yes, I've watched the best. There it is, all green, all still doing I/O. Not a lot of I/O. It's just this cloning of a virtual machine going on. Yep. But it's still going. Well, migrations have carried on through the whole process. If the initial 9 machines are across, we've nearly got that template across, and then it'll want to deploy some new VMs. Yeah.
Awesome. Good.
Well, so we've now done the deploy a whole new array, futz with it in ways that you wouldn't have to futz with a production array. Hopefully my pronunciation is not getting too Kiwi in there.
You mean a futz or?
With a T and a Z.
Yeah.
So we spent some time doing things that you won't need to as a customer in the real world because they ship from the factory without having been sent to Washington or to Zurich. We've then seen failure modes, we've seen controller failure, and then just because you can, we've done the in-place upgrade of the hardware from the mid-level to the high level of this range. Now we've done a Purity upgrade, and we're 5.5 hours in, and we've done what would probably be at least 6 months of life cycle, probably 2 years of life cycle operations in a production environment. We did have to involve support, but only because we had a system that was made up of pieces that had been to Zurich and to Washington.
But that's a good thing, because then we saw how support interacted with us, and before we even tried to.
And that's the really critical thing in it, that support reached out to us, and specifically to Cody, because he had posted about it, and said, hey, this array is not behaving the way it ought to. Should we do something about it?
I think it's really a testament to our support. I mean, it's something that here at Pure we're very proud of, our support organization. I'll have people in the field reach out to me like, hey, we've got this issue with the VMware plugin or something we see in ESX. Could you take a look and troubleshoot? I'm like, no, open a case with support, right? It's a selling tool. They're awesome. Yeah. They fix this stuff really well. And if it's a new problem, right, and it takes a little more time to solve, well, that's good. Once support knows about it, we can stop it from happening again.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's really a great part of Pure Storage is our support organization.
And when that's all part of the one fixed price, then it puts the onus on Pure to make it more efficient and to capitalize on those learnings to avoid problems happening again, rather than if you have to keep paying for it, or it's a professional services engagement to resolve these problems, then it's better for the vendor that the problem continue.
Yep.
That's what they say about consultancy. If you're not part of the solution, there's good money to be made from prolonging the problem. I like the model that this is all wrapped up in one price, and it's better for customers if it's easy, if it's better for us.
The simpler it is for customers, the simpler it is for us. Right? And I think we're all a lot happier for it. So it's been fun.
So that's been a whole heap of provisioning stuff, and really we've done a stupidly large amount of provisioning stuff in a short period of time. And Pure relatively fresh because we wore Stacy out for the first few hours. The other thing that we were going to do was actually deploy vRealize Orchestrator. We saw some video of Cody's lab environment with vRealize Orchestrator, but we're going to push it out into this environment and have a play.
Do it from scratch.
Yeah, what do I need to do?
So let's, I think we have the OVA sitting around here, so we'll deploy the vRealize Orchestrator OVA into his vCenter onto one of our data stores. The vRealize Orchestrator has been a product that I've been working with for a couple years now, and it really is, I mean, we mentioned this on the video, is really one of the hidden gems. Very underused tool, I think, from the VMware kind of ecosystem. And it's really starting to pick up a lot, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. Basically, the world's your oyster when it comes to VRO. Really, can it be scripted? Absolutely, right? So VRO can control it. And it's a pretty fun product, and we have a great FlashArray plugin that we're going to show you how it works and what you can do with it. To make it really easy to manage the flash array in conjunction with VMware or your compute platform or whatever else you want to orchestrate inside of VRO. And the one thing I do want to reiterate, right, is this is included in your vCenter license. So if you have vCenter, you have this today. So I recommend, hey, deploy it, start playing around with it, learn what you can do to orchestrate your infrastructure.
So I'm just following my nose through the deploy OVF wizard.
Pretty straightforward. At the end, we'll just need an IP and domain name and.
The challenge is that the appliance is sitting on my old NAS.
So it's going to take a little bit of time to copy. It's going to take a little bit.
Let me just check whether I put a copy somewhere on this machine. I thought I'd popped it into my downloads folder, but I don't see it there. No, it doesn't look like. Rather than pulling it off there, I'm fairly sure. Yeah, I might just pull it off my laptop's SSD, which is probably going to be a little less taxed.
Yeah.
There we go. It's not going to be lightning fast because it's pulled through the RDP virtual channel for drive redirection, but it's probably going to be a little faster than pulling it off. Sure.
Make sure you read that, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw the news recently about that one Wi-Fi agreement where nobody read, and some like couple thousand people agreed to it, and they agreed to clean toilets for a month or something like that.
Yeah, the legendary one is the Microsoft one where you agree to be Bill Gates' ball boy when he plays tennis.
Oh.
Fictional. And I'll put this on my server's net.
All right, so for the
what do we got? We'll use my usual. It's not the password I'm using inside this network. This one is.
the DNS in this environment.
There is.
Cool. So we need to let's do a forward and reverse lookup of make sure.
I want to put a host name in and.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I want to do it.
Let me just pop into my DNS server and create the DNS.
Trivia for the audience. What are the two most important things when deploying anything in VMware environments that you need to make sure you have working right? DNS and NTP. DNS and NTP. DNS and NTP.
Yeah.
That'll solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's name resolution or it's name resolution. As a senior engineer at a integrator some years ago, the two most common things I would say to junior engineers when they came to me with problems was it's name resolution and try it in a VM. I'm not sure that was particularly appreciated as a set of responses.
Actually, that second recommendation is actually how I got into VMware. I was doing a network support job, and my boss said, "Oh, we just got some VMware stuff. That problem you have, why don't you try it in a VM?" And that's how I first used DSX.
Cool.
Good advice.
Yeah, I had a series of VMware experiences, starting with Workstation back in 2000.
Oh, okay.
And was told that VMware wanted to run all of these servers in virtual machines. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to do that.
Get out of here. Get out of town. Yeah, it is. Just how that's changed in the past 15 years, 10 years is amazing.
All right. 195.
All right, so yeah, just FQDN and then.
And then the networking properties should all just inherit off that.
It's usually good to actually enter them in. I found.
Yeah, let's do that. Do for gateway. The main name is lab.local. Name servers. My domain controller.
So the domain name will be it's a little misleading. It's actually
or name of the VM.
The name of without the suffix. Yeah.
So that's the guest OS name that I've used up here.
Yeah, VR, exactly. Yeah, whatever the DNS resolve name is. Yep, exactly.
And then IP address.
Then for the
/24.
And then put the search path into just your suffix of your, yeah. I find it usually works the best when I make sure they're all entered in for VRO.
Cool. All right.
All right, let's tell VMware our experience.
Is it password length?
Oh.
I didn't quite have enough characters in my password. It's all right. I have another password that is, well, I have another character that I enter password.
I know of another character.
And well, it does also add another factor because I add a non-alphanumeric character.
True. All right, cool. And so we'll deploy.
And away it goes to deploy
the OVA.
VRO OVA. And how's my script running? There we go. Deploy some VMs. Yeah, what? All right, well, I can't deploy those VMs.
Didn't like something.
Didn't like something. I held my mouth wrong somewhere. So while the VRO appliance is deploying, I'll go and have a look at my script to deploy the VMs from template. That's not in that folder, it's in this one. Deploy VMs. And this is the unmodified script that worked last time. But first, I need to disconnect from vCenter. I'm already disconnected. Good.
It's funny you use the same. I have that same password I use when I give someone an account to my Active Directory. That's the exact same password I use. Make them change it though. Check that box. Check the. Probably still deploying. I imagine it's going to take a little bit of time. Yep.
2%.
It's
not going too badly off.
Of course, is it one of those things that starts at like 50% or something? I don't remember.
You completed the wizard. 35% of the task is complete.
Congratulations. So, you have much experience with VRO, or is this going to be?
Let me see. I've 62% through deploying my first VRO appliance.
Right.
So
Wow.
I'm a real beginner at this.
That's what makes it fun.
No matter how many times I've said it's the hidden gem that nobody uses, yeah, I don't use it either.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's a great website too. Now, like inside of the product, there's a way you can look at the different methods and scriptable objects that are available in like the JavaScript libraries. But there's also a really cool website, VROAPI.com, where it's basically just like an HTML browsable interface for all the SDKs of the different plugins inside of VRO. And this is run by VMware. This is run by an outside consultant that does a lot of VRO work, and it's really, really cool tool if you're doing some. Even honestly, even if you're not using VRO to use some of the VMware SDK, sometimes it can be kind of useful. Now there are sometimes slightly different. There's some things in the VRO SDK that aren't in the vCenter SDK, but it's a really cool tool, and you can see Pure Storage is listed here.
Yeah, you got your.
You can see our different objects, right? During the VRO demonstration, we talked about some of our custom objects we have. And so you can see all the methods, the return values, the parameters that they require for these objects, right? It's a really, really nice tool. So good handy reference if you're doing some VRO work.
We're going with that deploy.
Like I said, the goal of our plugin, though, is really to if you just want to have some workflows, kick them off in a variety of ways, you don't really need any of that stuff. You don't need to understand VRO actions or scriptable objects, the JavaScript, right? The whole concept of it is just get you started, be able to create volumes and pretty much manage the flash array without doing any custom work. A common thing that'll come up when I have a conversation with customers about VRO is, I don't need VRO. I'm not using VRA, right? So I don't need an orchestration tool.
Right.
And they're like, 'cause otherwise I'm not going to have people log into VRO to,
But VRO predates VRA by many years.
Exactly that. And also what I say to them is that there's really cool integration with vCenter that you can actually build your own web client plugin inside of the vSphere web client by like saying, oh, this workflow takes in a data store object. You can actually import that and say data store objects inside of vCenter. You have this workflow as a right-click thing.
As an object.
Nice. I mean, if you right-click on it now, you can see where that is on a VM or whatever. At the very bottom, there's that all vCenter orchestra. You can populate that with whatever, right?
Right. And
so it's kind of a cool way. Like if you want to, like we have a vSphere plugin, you did some of it earlier, but if you want to have a slightly different workflow or something that's not in it, this is a really great way of doing that without having to develop it or ask a vendor, hey, can you add this to your plugin? There's some cool advantages to VRO right out of the box with the integration with the vSphere web client.
Cool. So the deploy is completed.
Power on. And this will take a couple minutes for it to initialize its database and all that kind of stuff. Probably have to refresh that. The OVA's imports always do this. Refresh.
Yeah, they seem to be one of those slightly twitchy things in the vSphere client.
Yeah. I will say that at least the latest version, I don't think you have to go through all those installing the plugins to be able to upload OVAs and things like that. So it's certainly better. The HTML5 client though for vSphere is really looking cool. So
discussed how much we're looking forward to that being being fully featured.
Yes.
There we go. Are you on?
All right, we'll let that boot up, and it'll configure itself. And we'll
My
have to do.
little deploy VMs from templates script has run nicely.
Sweet.
And so I have a bunch of VMs sitting in my pure workload folder. And I better turn on the master machine. Should have turned him on first because he's the DHCP server for this network.
Oh. So what are these VMs doing?
So I've written just a little workload generator. Essentially, it's a Docker container that pulls some config files off this master machine, then pulls a document off it, constructs an email message, and sends the email message through Postgres that runs on the master. So it generates quite a lot of I/O and a little bit of CPU load, and it's just generating something that looks like some machine's doing something useful.
Oh, okay, I see.
Which is a little better than just having empty VMs sitting there on
A lot of
on the
a lot of those
data
VDI emulators, kind of in a sense.
store.
Right?
Yeah, and in that kind of spirit.
I hope all those emails are being sent to Vaughn. So that's really the one.
Yeah, I created about 30 user accounts in there, and Vaughn's name didn't come up in those. There we go. Give me all its IP addresses. It's on 109. So while we're waiting for that VRO appliance to start up, I'm just going to connect. And see if I can get this workload running so we can see a little bit more I/O going on. It turns out that the my workload can't generate a vast amount of I/O. Let's see if probably all of my VMs. Oh no, there's some IP addresses. That's good. This is just going out and discovering the 16 VMs that I've deployed from that template, and hopefully it'll find them. And then it's an Ansible script gets launched out of the back of that to go and configure them all, make sure they all get their make sure they all have all of the components that I need, and then I let the script to run. Yep. All right, so the appliance is up.
Yep, let's go to the IP address. And so before you can use vRealize Orchestrator, you need to configure authentication, right? And that's configured through one of two ways these days with 7.3 release, either directly through vSphere, which is what we'll do, or through vRealize Automation. Go to the control center, middle there on the left.
Orchestrator control center.
Then we'll log in with root and then the password selected. Cool. And so VMware's really made this deployment really easy in the latest releases. It's pretty straightforward. So you can, at this point, head next, change authentication to vSphere, and put in your vCenter. Now, for us, this is fine. If you happen to have a platform services controller that's not in your vCenter, like they're separate, you actually put in your PSC address. Yeah. That's easy to miss. Except the cert. And now just, your SSO account.
Yeah.
On the note of like vRealize Orchestrator being easy to deploy now, vRealize Automation is vastly easier to deploy these days as well. I mean, you basically just have a SQL server and an IaaS box if they can do the same thing. And then there's a really nice kind of walkthrough deployment wizard that you go through to put up VRA. So if you've done like VCAC in the past, the old incarnation, you're a little frustrated with it, VMware's done an amazing job simplifying it, right? So yeah, it still takes an hour or so to deploy, but it's just next, all right, enter in this number. No, not that number, this number, right? So it's very helpful, and go, are there any problems? I'll check for the problems. Oh, I'll fix the problems for you. So it's really a helpful wizard. So
all of the hard work of the integration engineering team is starting to actually show in the product.
Exactly. They've done an amazing job of hearing the situations people ran into and fixing them. So now we can just choose like the administrators at vSphere.local or something. Do a quick search there to make sure it finds it. Maybe drop it down to administrators. Yeah, okay. Save changes. So we're pretty much at this point, we've configured it. The last thing we want to do, because we do have to reboot the appliance, is that we want to install the plugin. Anytime you add a plugin to, well, anytime you do that authentication, you have to reboot the services, not the whole VM. And anytime you add a new plugin to VRO, you also have to reboot it. So let's install the plugin. If you scroll down a little bit, there's your manage plugins. You click on that and browse and put in that VMO app file right there. The Pure Storage Flash Array VRO plugin is available in the VMware Solution Exchange. So if you want to download it yourself, you can grab it from there. So accept our EULA. It says I get $1 every time someone installs it. You have to receive any of those royalties.
And I get a penny of that dollar. Right?
The check's in the post.
Oh, yeah. The check's in the mail.
Ask USPS where your check is.
I'll send him a letter. So the last thing we want to do here is just need to restart the service. So you can go to the home, but I've seen some issues with it. Sometimes on the initial install of it. So the best thing to do is really just go to the vSphere web client, right-click on it, and then restart the VRO server, and do the friendly guest OS reboot.
Or restart guest OS. Are you sure? Yes, please.
As I said, you don't have to do it this way. The first install, it seems like there's a little tool inside of the restart the configuration server. And the first time, it seems like did not want you to do that. You actually want to reboot the whole thing. But after you install a plugin, you just have to reboot the config server. And VRO does have multiple deployment methods. Like we've done the simple one, like one VRO appliance, and that's great. But they have multi-VRO appliances. Our plugin is supported in a multi-VRO instance, right? Deploying plugins is a slightly different process with a multi-VRO instance, because you have to kind of deploy it in one, then you kind of copy config and then apply it to the other one. But it's well documented and pretty straightforward to follow.
And robust and reliable when you do it.
Exactly. So we'll wait for the service to come back up, and then we'll be able to log in. We have Java installed on this VM.
You want Java?
So unfortunately, it's one of the remaining holdouts. The client for vRealize Orchestrator still is the Java one. It does need Java installed.
So do you have it installed?
I'm not sure that I do.
There's another 15 minutes.
Should be quick.
Services are started. That's going to go to New Zealand Google, which is horribly slow from here. Trombones out of some point of presence in New Zealand. So where do I get? Yeah, where am I going to launch the client from?
So if you go back to that IP address. It's probably take another minute or two, yeah.
I'm just keeping an eye on my build. Okay. So that we've got a nice fast streaming network that we can pull all of this.
The Java download, knock out the stream. There we go.
Thankfully, the stream likes lots of upload rather than lots of download.
Yeah, it's true. So at VMware, I know you're going to be pretty busy, obviously, with the Brown Bag stuff. Are you going to be able to go to any sessions or anything, or are you pretty much packed all the time?
Oh, I'm going to be babysitting the tech talks the whole time. Even if I have somebody else doing the actual operations, I hover over it like a nervous parent. But the tech talks are going to be pretty intense for us this year. This is the first year that we've been in the content catalog and the schedule builder, and also the first year that we've had people whose submissions for the main conference schedule have actually got an email from VMware saying, if you'd like an alternative place to give the core of your message, then there are these vBrown Bag tech talks that you can present at. So we're going to have a much more diverse set of presenters and content, and it is going to be all tech talks all the time. We're not going to have any of the podcasts on our stage because I simply don't have time for them. Yeah. And very happily, the VMware Communities team are providing podcasting booths. So if you are a podcast host who's going to be at VMworld, get in touch with the Communities team and book their podcast recording booths.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really cool. Is this the first year that they're doing this? Or?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, that was a pretty neat idea to have those podcasting booths.
Yeah, so good job, Eric, and and Katie and Corey.
So do you end up watching this like the session streams after the fact then, or do you?
I have half an eye on the tech talks while they're running, but we run such high velocity that it's hard to get back and watch that because I'm usually going on. And particularly this year, there's only a week between VMworld US and VMworld EMEA. And so I'm going back to New Zealand between.
Oh, geez.
And then, lots and lots of flights. I'm, going to retain my high status within New Zealand.
Oh, I bet. All right, so you can do the start orchestrator client, and look at that, perfect timing.
Yeah, other than the security stuff around. Okay, there we are. I'm clicking in too many places.
I'll be adding one more thing. Confirm usually.
Yeah, confirm we want to launch it. Yes.
So just go ahead and log in. And so what we'll do, the FlashArray plugin is installed, so we'll authenticate a FlashArray and just kind of look at some of the workflows. We'll look at the inventory synchronization. We'll see our data stores and so forth.
I'm forgetting which version of vSphere I'm working with.
Oh, straighter. There's a bar there.
There is an R. Come on, get me in the right field in the right place. There we go. Administrator at vSphere.one.
There we go.
There we go.
So so there's to add a FlashArray into VRO, there's two steps. We import the certificate, and then we can actually add the FlashArray into the inventory of the
Yeah, we're done there. And I'll just start some workload running in my bunch of virtual machines, so we can actually see some bit more I/O going on. That's just going to kick off 30 machines, 30 containers.
So we're in the initial splash page here. So where we want to go here is the blue kind of workflow icon you see. So this is where all of our workflows are. And if you go down to the Pure Storage folder, and then the FlashArray connection management, first thing we want to do is import FlashArray certificate, so that yellow one. So you can go ahead and execute that. You can either right-click on it or hit the little green play button on the top. So you want to add in the FQDN or the IP. And we'll probably want to hit yes on the warning.
Of course, because we don't actually have a trust for that certificate.
Cool. Certificate's been added. So now we can do add flash array connection. So the one point I do want to make, right, is you don't actually have to do this. If you want to have the workflow, authenticate the flash array, do what it needs to do, and then remove it, you can also do that as well, right?
So
if you do
build that authentication into the workflow.
Exactly. If you want to use those JavaScript methods or actions, even use it in VRO, we can authenticate it. So if you just want to do a one-off, if you just want VRO to always be authenticated to that flash array, this is what you would do.
Right. Well, let's do that.
So let's do that. Just give it a friendly name. And so you can hit yes on this. So what this is going to do is going to query the flash array for all available REST API versions. If you want it, no, you can just manually type it in, but we'll have it query the array, and then submit. And so let's go to the flash array. It's going to then authenticate, token exchange, all that stuff, and then it's going to import and pull in the connection and volume and snapshot information of that flash array. So it looks like we ran into an error here. So let's take a look. Let's run the add flash array connection workflow. If you just so if you right click on the instance, we can take a look at the red one there.
The red one.
Yeah, allow you to rerun it. So maybe we type something wrong. Or... All right, so brown bag. Yes, maybe the password. Now we can take a look at the log. There we go. Password. Okay, cool. So now you can click on the inventory section, which is the tab to the right. And you see the Pure Storage. You can now expand that.
There it is.
And then you can expand our array. And now you can expand the flash array object, the volume, snapshots. If you happen to have any snapshots on our volume, you could expand that volume and see it. I don't know if we do or not.
We don't.
We don't. So you could actually right click on that object and snapshot if you want to. So run workflow. And
right, here are the ones that are
exactly. So you can create snapshot, all kinds of workflows that are tagged on those objects, because those are actually objects in the inventory now in the database of VRO, and so they know what are their inputs and what are outputs. So I know we're running a little bit less slow on time, so I don't know if you want to go any further or just kind of.
I think having registered it up, seen it in the inventory, I just pop back and see if I've managed to get us a noticeable blip in the stats in here. No, it doesn't seem like I've generated a lot of IO, and we've got yeah, we've got 100 gigs of data has come in, and the IO has been consistent. All right, well, I think we've run a pretty long time here, and particularly for those of you who've been with us for the 6 hours since our scheduled start time, 5 since we went live online. There's been a lot of content. It's been some really interesting content, particularly going through all of those upgrade processes and just seeing how simple and easy so much of this is, how little we had to get under the covers and spend time configuring things. You know, there wasn't a lot of yak shaving going on to get to the point where we could do useful work.
Yeah, and like the point about this, right, is that Pure is a team, and we want to partner with you, right? And so we partnered together today to make sure things went well. Our support, our field team, right, our solutions architect team. It's the same thing that when you're a customer, we do the same effort for you as well. So we appreciate your time and of course, being here and doing all this.
Yeah, this is great fun. Well, this has been the vBrownBag build day at Pure Storage in 2017. From all of the massive team that are actually standing outside the room sweating as the troubles went through, and now are very happy because we've had a fabulous time. Thank you very much for joining us, and keep in touch. Watch for more vBrownBag build days and all the tech talks. Watch for the Pure Storage tech talks at VMworld, and reach out and talk to your local Pure people. Thanks very much.